Growing up, life often threw me curveballs. My early years were a chaotic mix of struggles and fleeting joys. My family wasn't well off, and our neighborhood wasn't the safest. Despite the hardships, I learned resilience and the importance of finding small joys amidst the chaos. My childhood taught me survival and the value of genuine connections, laying the foundation for my perseverance later in life. As I entered adulthood, those lessons became even more relevant. I navigated various jobs, striving for stability and purpose. Relationships came and went, each teaching me about trust, betrayal, and self-worth. By my 30s, I had a clearer understanding of myself and my goals. Yet nothing prepared me for the whirlwind of events leading me to the brink of a new chapter in life. A scream of pain echoed in my mind. My scalp throbbed, and my skin felt like it was being pricked by needles. I tried to open one eye, but the brightness felt like a supernova, piercing my brain like a runaway freight train driven by a furious, possibly inebriated Ted Nugent. A horrible screeching sound built up, like cat nails on an endless chalkboard. "Sweet Jesus, Buddha, Shiva, anyone!" "Cthulhu," I muttered. I retched, but had nothing left to vomit. The screeching coalesced into something recognizable as a human voice. I forced my eyes open and tried to understand the blurry form above me. Shutting my eyes and reopening them, I saw a pair of feet in pink toenail polish and cotton candy slippers. Okay, a woman's feet, I thought. Probably not Leonard from Trailer 6, who sometimes liked to feel pretty when drunk. These feet were too small, lacked toe fungus, and were attached to well-formed legs without his moles or Rick Astley tattoo. The voice began making sense in Spanish, but my limited Spanish from Sesame Street didn't cover what was being said. I caught words like 32 donkeys and your grandmother, likely not an invitation to a Tupperware party. Realizing I was lying on my side in the trailer park's white gravel dust, I pushed myself to sit, dry heaving from nausea and a massive headache. The screeching stopped and the feet jumped back. I looked up to see things had worsened. Rosa Rafaela Rodriguez glared at me, clutching her pink robe and pointing accusingly. Her chihuahua stood ready to attack. Most avoided Rosa. Leonard called her the angriest woman on the planet. I avoided her since she reacted to my friendly greeting as if I tried to kidnap her. Along with court notices, lawyer bills, parole supervision fees, and utility final notices, I got an earful from her. Giving up, I turned and walked away, which only fueled her fury. Despite avoiding her, I enjoyed watching her outside in her transparent pink robe, brightening my otherwise bleak existence in our mostly abandoned trailer park. She drew herself up and launched into me again. Ignoring her, I struggled to my feet, pushing an umbrella off. She stopped, looked me over with disgust, and switched to English. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I looked down and saw I was standing in the rose bushes outside her trailer, which explained the pain. More troubling, I was unclothed and painted green, white, and red. A small crowd, including Leonard in overalls, Maisie looking like Danny DeVito in drag, and Delbert and Tawny in matching sweats with 5 o'clock shadows, watched with amusement. I grabbed an umbrella to cover myself, sending Rosa's chihuahua into a barking frenzy. "You scared my little Liam," Rosa snapped, picking up the dog. I shook my head, regretting it immediately. "Liam? Who names a chihuahua Liam?" "She likes Liam Hemsworth," Maisie chimed in, fanning herself. "I prefer Chris Hemsworth, but I wouldn't kick Liam out of bed for eating cookies, if you know what I mean," Maisie added. Rosa's shriek made me cringe, expecting the glass to shatter. The maintenance guy who could fix windows had disappeared a while ago. Rosa, pointing at me, demanded, "You think that's funny?" "No," I replied. "Chris and Liam would be horrified." Maisie huffed, folding her arms. "Not what I meant. You," she clarified. Rosa launched into another Spanish tirade, likely not a history lesson. Her robe fell open, revealing she wore nothing underneath. The chihuahua pawed at her, pulling the robe further open, showing off a well-groomed heart shape. "Never seen a naked woman before," Rosa snapped. "Not many built like you. I love the heart," I replied. She closed her robe, annoyed. "Clean your vomit out of my rose bushes, a-hole." I looked down at the mess. "I'll get to it this afternoon." "Yeah, right," Rosa replied, disbelieving. "You stole my heart," I said, nodding at her robe flapping open. She tried to close it, exposing a nipple before covering up again. "What?" she questioned. "Nothing. I'm staying until the show is over," I said. She growled and stormed off, her robe flying up to reveal her bare bum. The crowd dispersed, leaving Leonard, Maisie, and me. "That's quite a woman," Leonard muttered, scratching himself. "For God's sake, Leonard, she's half your age," Maisie said. "Yeah, she is," Leonard grinned. "Pervert," Maisie retorted. "Yep," Leonard agreed, still looking where Rosa had disappeared. Hey, Maisie, I called, still watching where Rosa had disappeared. Joseph, is it Sunday? It's Sunday, Maisie confirmed. Good. Then I'm not late for work, I said. Maisie looked puzzled. What does Mexicano honorario mean? Honorary Mexican, I replied, seeing the letters written on my chest. I'm going to kill Miguel. Dragging myself to my trailer, I retrieved my key from under a flower pot. Inside, my furniture consisted of 2 lawn chairs, a thrift shop radio, and a milk crate. I put on some shorts and fetched several buckets of water for Rosa's garden, not wanting to ask to use her hydrant. I spent the rest of the day fighting my hangover with gallons of water and Tylenol, setting my alarm before passing out. I was at the gate before sunrise when Miguel pulled up in the old school bus. Hey, Jose, he grinned. It's Joseph, you a-hole, I corrected him. It's Jose now. We made you an honorary Mexican, remember? Miguel reminded me. Yeah, I saw the label. You didn't need to use a permanent marker. I think my blood was replaced with tequila, I said. And mezcal, Miguel nodded. You left me at the gate naked, I accused him. You had a sombrero, he said smugly. I glared as I sat behind him. I woke up in Rosa's garden. Is that a metaphor? 'Cause I bet her rose garden is amazing, Miguel joked. No, idiot. I threw up on her actual roses, I clarified. Lucky you're alive. She has a crazy temper. Her ex-husband cheated, and she stabbed both him and his mistress. She's dangerous, Miguel explained. Why'd you do that to me? I asked, still annoyed. Honor. You're the first gringo crew boss who doesn't think we'll steal everything, he answered. We're harvesting tomatoes. What is there to steal? I questioned. It's pronounced Jesus. We like your common sense. It's rare, Miguel said. Though I was technically the crew boss, Miguel ran everything. I just stayed out of the way and picked tomatoes with the others. You could be the boss, you know, Miguel suggested. No way. I need you to take the blame if anything goes missing, I replied. He repeated this in Spanish to the crew, making them laugh all the way to the fields. 3 hours into our 14-hour day, my parole officer showed up. Joseph, just checking in to make sure you made it to work, Pio Heinen sneered. I'm here, I replied. It's a miracle. You know the difference between a parolee and an inmate? Just one mess up and you're a big mess, Pio said. I'm meeting my parole conditions. I'm working, I'm clean, and I'm not involved in anything, I responded. You've had 3 jobs in 6 months. Now you're working with a bunch of wetbacks, he said, glancing at Miguel, who pretended not to understand English. You'll never make another 18 months. I lost those jobs because you interfered, I accused. They needed to know what kind of loser they'd hired, he sneered. Time for a pill test. You have 2 hours to get to the center. I don't have a car, and it's almost 2 hours away, I explained. You know the deal. You fail or miss it, you're back inside. He chuckled and left. Miguel walked up beside me. Sure you're not Mexican, Jose? Miguel asked. Pretty sure. Unless Mom was with the gardener, I joked. You might want to ask, just to be sure, Miguel suggested. Why? I inquired. Because that man wants you on the other side of a wall, he said, staring after Pio's car. Jesus. You're pronouncing it wrong. Remember, you're Mexican now, I said. Alejandro will drive you to the test center. I don't have time to train a new crew boss, Miguel stated. We arrived at the test center with 15 minutes to spare. I had to pry my hands off the seat, not knowing you could drift a bus in heavy traffic. On the way back, Alejandro chatted a lot, but he didn't speak English. My Spanish was limited to counting, naming colors, and some obscenities, so we didn't get far. At dinner, Miguel sat next to me. Saturday night, you started to tell me how you ended up here but passed out before explaining how a big-shot stockbroker ended up picking tomatoes. Not much to tell. An SEC investigation hit my firm. I didn't think it involved me, but I was locked out. Turns out, there was insider trading under a fake account I had access to. I got blamed, but they couldn't prove it, so they pulled my Series 7 license, I explained. You still ended up in jail, Miguel noted. Yeah, they found cocaine in my car during the investigation. It wasn't mine, but I couldn't prove it. They used it to pressure me about the missing money. Tens of millions. I got 3 years, but only served 6 months in county jail due to overcrowding, I continued. You sure you didn't take the money? If you did, I have a cousin, Miguel suggested. If I had millions, I'd be in Mexico by now, I replied. So where'd the pills come from? He asked. I thought they were planted, but I picked up high-end clients from the airport a lot. One could have left it. Bad luck. Everything fell apart. My wife stuck around until I was sentenced, then divorced me, taking our savings, I said. What a witch, Miguel commented. I wasn't totally numb to it, but I had enough cheap tequila to take the edge off. She works at the same company, so she's lucky she didn't get fired. That job means a lot to her, I explained. True love conquers all, huh? Miguel said sarcastically. True love doesn't pay the bills, I replied. What were you making? Miguel inquired. With bonuses, almost $500,000 a year. Now I'm barely over minimum wage. She took everything, I said. Couldn't you find it? He asked. She's an accountant, and they're good at hiding money. It'd take money, time, and lawyers to dig it out, and I don't have any of those. Maybe someday I can look into it and sue for my share, I responded. Miguel shook his head sadly. I've seen your paycheck. It's going to be a while. Against my better judgment, I let Miguel talk me into going to another bar on Saturday night. You need to get out, Jose. Have some fun, Miguel urged. Like last week, where I wished I could die on Sunday? I retorted. Despite arguing, I climbed into the back seat. 8 guys could fit in the old brown Bonneville as long as no one worried about seatbelts. We're going somewhere more fun this time, Miguel promised. I thought that was your favorite bar, I said. They didn't appreciate us enough, he replied. Did we get thrown out? I asked. Maybe, Miguel admitted. Didn't your cousin own that place? I questioned. Distant cousin, he grinned. Besides, this club has dancing. When we arrived at the parking lot, I glanced at him. A salsa club? Isn't that Cuban? I asked. This place has hot chicks wearing very little. I'd come here if it was a waltz club, he replied. You do know how to dance, right? I inquired. Yes, I can do the polka and the waltz, I said. Seriously? Miguel asked, surprised. I can also tango, foxtrot, salsa, jive, and more. Beth and I used to hit dance clubs religiously, I elaborated. Thank God, I thought we were getting thrown out again, he said, relieved. I laughed. I'll buy your first beer. Domestic, Miguel requested. Yeah, I know. I've seen your paycheck, I responded. We had a blast. The club had 2 bachelorette parties and 3 divorce parties, making the ratio of women to men over 2 to 1. Most women were already tipsy when we arrived. I was dragged onto the floor by 2 divorcees, a maid of honor, 3 bridesmaids, and one mother of the bride who copped a feel so fast I hadn't finished my drink. I finally sat down, watching Miguel get dragged off by the mother of the bride. Holding my Modelo Especial, I scanned the packed floor, filled with more bare skin than a nudist colony. I spotted a woman with a full, toothsome behind in skin-tight jeans. She was talking to someone at a table, bent over to hear in the pandemonium. Every time she moved, my heart, among other things, moved with her. Damn, that was one fine bum. I was still entranced when Miguel stumbled to our table and sat next to me. Yokuda warned me, a-hole, Miguel said. Yeah, she was a handful. That cougar got my zipper down. She mentioned she was divorced like 6 times, he replied, pausing to follow my gaze. Damn, that's some fine... He stopped as the woman straightened and looked at us. Rosa's eyes narrowed as she approached. Miguel raised his hands. Hey man, I just got here, he said loudly enough for Rosa to hear. She ignored him and came right up to me. What do you think you're staring at, you pervert? Rosa demanded. I was about to apologize when a giggling woman in a toy bridal veil fell into the table, dragged by her maid of honor. The maid of honor, with a pink sash, grabbed my arm. She needs to dance with 5 more guys, the maid of honor insisted. I was pulled to my feet and gestured helplessly to Rosa. I'll be back. The bride, less drunk than her bridesmaid, seemed uncomfortable with the game. I tried to be a gentleman. I didn't make it back to the table for 3 more dances, intercepted by another bride, another maid of honor, and a very pretty trans woman who saved me from the cougar. At least dancing with her wasn't like dancing with an aroused octopus. I was heading back to the table when a hand grabbed mine, pulling me back onto the dance floor. Were you ever coming back to your table? Rosa glared at me as we started to dance. She seemed less angry than before. I tried. I had a cold beer back there, but it's probably warm by now, I said. No, I drank it. I was waiting for you to come back and apologize, Rosa responded. Any inclination to apologize vanished. Nonsense. If you didn't want people staring at your bum, you wouldn't paint those jeans on and bend over like that. Rosa's lips tightened, eyes narrowing. That wasn't for your benefit, pervert. I shrugged. I didn't see a reserved sign on it, and I looked pretty close. I expected her to explode, but she chuckled and shook her head. Miguel says you're not as much of an a-hole as I thought. He said it was his fault. They didn't tie me down and force me to drink, I said, trying to remember. At least I don't think they did, but he could have not painted me and dropped me off unclothed. She smiled. I didn't expect you to actually come back and clean up the vomit. I wish you'd told me that. Dragging those buckets around with a hangover was awful. The dance with Rosa was pleasant, and I felt we had a truce, at least for now. I watched her walk back to her table, enjoying the view. She glanced back, smiled, and mouthed "pervert" at me. I winked, and she rolled her eyes before sitting down. Miguel looked me over for injuries. "Looks like you got away alive." "She's your cousin," I said. "Yeah, second cousin," Miguel replied. "Thanks for putting in a good word," I said. "Kinda owed you that," Miguel admitted. "Man, you did. A-hole," I said. I managed a week without any mayhem, which was a record. 1 call to my PO, 6 days of work, and no hangover for 2 Sundays in a row. Life was good, so of course it couldn't last. We finished a field early and were heading back before sunset. "Hey, Jose, isn't that your parole officer with the blonde woman in that restaurant?" Miguel asked. "Yeah, that's..." I froze. "What?" Miguel pulled away from the stoplight. "That's my ex-wife," I said, noticing Beth's blouse was unbuttoned an awful lot for a friendly lunch. "What's she doing with that a-hole?" Miguel glanced at me, then focused on the road. "Hold on." He stopped the bus, yelled in Spanish to the back, and a bearded guy moved to the front. Miguel opened the door as I started to get up. "No, you stay here," Miguel instructed. "I need to know what's going on," I protested. "Exactly, but you're still pronouncing it wrong. This is Jesus, and he knows you're parole officer. We have a cousin who works there. Maybe we'll get lucky and find out," Miguel said. I wanted to say it was a coincidence, but what were the odds of my ex-wife accidentally meeting my low-life parole officer? I sighed, thinking maybe she was checking up on me. Miguel raised an eyebrow at me. Maybe, but it feels messed up. We rolled out, and Miguel glanced at me in the mirror. "I'll come by tonight and let you know what Jesus finds out." I nodded, feeling sick. Jesus didn't find out much, but what he did learn was unsettling. One of the waitresses, a cousin, had noticed Beth all over Fish, who seemed very nervous. She was trying to get him to do something, using seduction. Jesus said if her blouse unbuttoned anymore, she'd need to start on her skirt. "Maybe she wants him to go easy on me," I said, though it sounded hollow. "You can't be that stupid, Jose. Going easy on you wouldn't make him uncomfortable. He's cool with child aggressors and eliminators. He's got a good reputation," Miguel countered. "How do you know?" I asked. "There aren't many POs around here. I got a cousin who..." Miguel started. I waved him off. "I have a bad feeling about this." Miguel stared at my peeling linoleum tabletop. "You gonna look into it?" "Yeah, I'll just pull a few grand out of my account for a private eye." I shook my head. "I can't afford that. Do private eyes even exist anymore?" Miguel grinned. "You don't need to. I got a cousin who works in housekeeping at her condo." "Jesus, Miguel, how many cousins do you have?" I asked. "As many as we need. We're everywhere and invisible," he replied. "You don't need to do this," I said. He laughed. "This is cool. Play detective. Besides, it's what friends do." We went to his cousin Isabel's house. She thought it sounded exciting and fun at first. But when she asked for a picture of Beth, she looked at it, then suddenly forgot English and started speaking rapid-fire Spanish to Miguel. "Miguel, what's going on?" I asked, sensing something was wrong. He looked pained. "Ooh, Jose." "Even I know what piota means, Miguel," I said, irritated. Isabel squared up. "She's got a couple of guys who visit all the time." "We're divorced. I may not like it, but it happens," I said, lying. I hated it. Isabel looked at me stonily. "You've been divorced for 4 years?" My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" "I've worked there for 4 years, and she's had one guy coming over the whole time," Isabel revealed. I felt oddly relieved. "I can't be her. I was home every night." "They come over at lunchtime. I'm sure it's her." "Skinny bum witch," Isabel said. "Another guy started showing up 2 years ago." Miguel pulled out his phone and showed a picture of Fish. "This guy?" Miguel asked. She shook her head. "No, the new guy is a big blonde, maybe a weightlifter. The long-term guy is thin, dark-haired, jittery." "You gotta be kidding me," I said, trying to sit but ending up on the floor. "That sounds like Alan Voorhees from accounting." "Crap." Isabel looked at me sadly. "You didn't suspect?" "How could I? Her office is 5 minutes away. Mine was 40 minutes in good traffic," I explained. Miguel grabbed my shoulder. "You're not going to do something crazy, right? You'll break your parole." I shook my head. "Go after them? My martial arts training is walking into spider webs and going full kung fu theater. I can't afford a PI, and screwing around isn't illegal. There's nothing I can do." Miguel shrugged, knowing I was right. I expected Fish to show up with more demands, but he didn't. 2 weeks later, just as we were near the city limits, Miguel got a call. He cut across 3 lanes of traffic and sped back to the trailer park. He stopped directly in front of my trailer. Rosa, in her skimpy pink robe, stood cross-armed, glaring at Fish. Leonard and Maisie watched, fascinated. I barely stepped off the bus before Rosa shifted her attention to me. "Did you give this idiot permission to go into your trailer? He came in right after the bus left," Rosa demanded. "It's a condition of parole," Fish said, glaring. "You have no expectation of privacy." "Yeah, but you need reasonable suspicion. Otherwise, it's maltreatment. I read the terms. I can ask for another officer to be present," I countered. His lip twitched. "That's for female parolees who want a female officer." "It doesn't say that. It just says I can have one." I decided to drop my bomb. "What did Beth want?" His face paled. "I don't need this." He turned and walked to his car. I followed. "What's going on, Fish?" I asked. He opened the door and looked at me, visibly aged. "How would I know?" He slammed the door, started the car, then rolled down the window. "I'm transferring you to Anderson. I don't want any part of this." "Part of what, damn it?" I shouted. He flicked something out the window and stared at me. "Your ex-wife wants you back in prison. Watch your back. She'll do anything." He drove off. Leonard picked up a package from the dirt. "Oxy in 4 bags, probably 20 tabs. That'd be intent to distribute," Leonard said. Miguel shook his head silently. I closed my eyes. Rosa moved closer, her scent calming me. She watched Fish's car disappear. "He was going to plant that in your trailer?" Rosa asked. I nodded, barely able to speak. "You'd have gone back to prison?" She continued. I nodded again. "It would be to a real prison this time, with real gangs." I shivered, and Rosa grabbed my arm. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "Not really," I admitted. "Why does your ex want you in prison? You're not stalking her, right?" Rosa asked, concerned. "I don't even have a car. Miguel drives me everywhere. How could I stalk her?" I replied, trying to focus. Somehow, Rosa holding my arm helped me focus. "Something's going on, but I don't know what. We're divorced. She got everything, and I haven't been near her." I took a deep breath and told Rosa how I ended up divorced and on parole. She looked puzzled. "She tried to screw that guy into putting you in prison?" Rosa asked incredulously. "Seems like it," I confirmed. "She must really hate you," Rosa said, shaking her head. "I didn't do anything. She was the one cheating, and I didn't even know it," I said, feeling the weight of it all. Rosa's lips twisted attractively. "You didn't have to do anything. She might blame you for her actions. Women, you know." Her big brown eyes locked on mine. "He's right. You need to watch your back. She hates you that much and isn't stopping now." I felt exhausted. The idea that Beth hated me was sickening. I looked at Miguel. "Do you have any cousins in Bergman Towers? That's where Beth works," I asked. He grinned. "What can I say, man? We're everywhere. I'll also tell Isabel to get pictures of any visitors she gets at home," Miguel said. Maisie, wearing Leonard's overalls, peered at Fish's disappearing car. "Leonard and I will keep an eye on your trailer, but you should install a latch with a padlock," she suggested. I felt Rosa let go and turned to her. "You called Miguel?" I asked. She nodded. "You saved me," I said gratefully. She looked uncertain for a second, then smirked. "You spend all your time watching my bum. I figured I could watch yours for a change," she teased. Miguel rolled his eyes. "Yours is a lot more interesting than his," he quipped. Rosa looked up. "God, I hope so. If it isn't, I spend too much time at the gym." She winked and slapped her bum. I blinked and dragged my eyes back to hers. "Where do you work, anyway?" I asked. "Crestridge Medical Center. I'm an LPN. Pay isn't great, but the insurance is good," Rosa replied. I pretended to study her bum. "And it obviously has a great gym," I commented. She smiled smugly and wiggled a little. "Damn right," she said. Miguel looked at the bus. "We got a field of tomatoes waiting, Jose," he reminded me. I nodded. "Yeah, thanks again, Rosa. You saved me," I said. "I'm glad I could help. Let me know what's going on, okay?" she said. She walked away toward her trailer, letting the wind play with her robe. "Wow," Maisie muttered, scratching herself through the overalls. "Sop that up with a biscuit." Leonard rolled his eyes. "For God's sake, she's half your age." Maisie grinned. "Yeah, she is." "Pervert," Leonard muttered. "Yep," Maisie replied with a satisfied nod. It took Isabel 6 days to get pictures of both of Beth's regular visitors. We gathered in her living room as she showed them to us. One was Voorhees, whom I barely noticed at Beth's office. I never imagined him sneaking over and sleeping with her while I was at work. The other guy was a mystery. Big, blonde, with a crew cut, wearing a decent suit and carrying a briefcase. I didn't recognize him at all. Miguel looked at me. I shook my head. Nothing. Maybe he works for your old company, Isabel suggested, clearly enjoying her spy role. No, I've never seen him, I replied. What about at your wife's office? Isabel asked, eager to continue the investigation. I visited there a few times. I recognized Voorhees, didn't I? The brokers were in my building, but the support staff was in the headquarters, I said. Miguel looked disappointed. I have a cousin who does security there. Really? I was starting to think Miguel's family tree was enormous. He nodded, frowned, and pulled out his phone. Let me text him, he said. Seconds later, he had a response. We can drop by and he'll take a look. As we headed out, Isabel's husband spoke quietly to Miguel, who chuckled softly. Isabel's husband wants us to keep investigating, Miguel said. Why? He hasn't even been involved, I asked, puzzled. Isabel enjoys it. She's more energized when she gets home from work now, Miguel explained. Wait, so I began. Yeah, she's had a fantasy about being a detective. She even bought handcuffs and a fingerprint kit, Miguel said, grinning. Stop. I don't want to know, I interrupted. Miguel laughed. But it's really... Dear God, Miguel, just stop, or I'll tell you about Leonard and Maisie and the spatula, I warned. Ugh, that's nasty. You win, Miguel conceded. We arrived at a small apartment building. Miguel led me to the third floor and knocked on a green door. A powerful red-haired giant opened it. Miguel introduced us. Jose, this is my cousin Bjorn. He manages the security team at your ex-wife's building. They hired him from the NYPD, Miguel introduced. Miguel, he doesn't look very Mexican, I said, puzzled. Yeah, well, he's Norwegian, Miguel explained. Bjorn sighed. Swedish, Miguel. Yeah, bork, 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 Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish, whatever. Miguel shrugged. Bjorn waved us in with a smile. Miguel's still mad about that FIFA match last year. Oh, not that again. You got lucky once, Miguel retorted. Bjorn looked thoughtful. Got lucky on a $100 bet? Get lucky with your sister, man, Miguel shot back. She's taller than me. She'd have to hold you by the feet and use you like a toy. How long can you hold your breath? Maybe I'll give her a call, Bjorn said, grinning. Miguel winced comically. Moron. So where's Kelsey? She's the highlight of visiting you. Bjorn handed us beers. She's stuck in traffic. Had a gig on the east side. Miguel pointed to a picture of Bjorn with a cheerful, pale woman. Kelsey's a clown. Like, a real one. Went to clown school and everything. Academy. It's Clown Academy, Bjorn corrected. She's a medical clown now, working in children's wards at hospitals. I met her in New York when she was a busker doing street magic. She got stuck there when her circus shut down. I arrested her. Seriously? I sipped my beer, intrigued. Yeah, she fought with a mime and I had to arrest them both, Bjorn said. Miguel snickered. Did you keep a straight face when you told the mime he had the right to remain silent? It took 3 tries. Then I searched Kelsey, found a dozen balloon animals, rubber chickens, a joy buzzer, 6 giant lollipops, 2 bulb horns, and about 50 yards of handkerchiefs tied together. The last one had a red lace strip tied to it. It took 15 minutes and drew a huge crowd. She made nearly $600 in tips. Hell of a way to meet. I savored another sip. Yeah, she found me on duty a few days later, gave me her number, and demanded a date. The door opened and a cheerful clown walked in. Not creepy, but bouncy and cute. Hey, Miguel, nacho cheese Doritos. She grinned at me. It's the only Spanish I know. Her silliness was infectious, and I laughed. She leaned over and studied me intently. Bjorn giving you some line of nonsense about me? She asked, raising her hands. He tells everyone I'm a clown. You are in clown makeup and carrying a rubber chicken, I pointed out. She held up the chicken. Dinner. And maybe I overdid the eyeshadow this morning. She deadpanned, then grinned. Anyway, it was only 43 handkerchiefs, not 50, and he loves the clown thing. She spun into a pirouette and slid into Bjorn's lap. Don't you, babe? He kissed her, and she spun out of his lap. Be right back. Gotta get the makeup off. Bjorn watched her leave, then turned serious. The text sounded urgent. What's up? Jose has a problem. Someone is trying to set him up, and he doesn't know why, Miguel explained. Bjorn eyed me. He looks more like a Joseph than a Jose to me. Miguel, I corrected. He tipped his bottle toward me. I have strict instructions to keep you out of the complex, so I hope that's not the help you're looking for. What's the problem? It took about 15 minutes to explain, and Kelsey joined us with a beer. Sounds like a mess. Does your ex hate you that much? she asked. I shrugged. No reason for it, as far as I know. What are you trying to do now? Bjorn inquired. We're trying to figure out who this is. Miguel showed Bjorn a picture of the blonde guy with Beth. Seen this guy? Bjorn nodded. Yeah, he's been around, not as much lately. Didn't know he knew Beth. Never saw him with Voorhees either. So who is he? I asked. Evan Batchelder. He tried to intimidate me when he first showed up. He's an SEC investigator, Bjorn revealed. Miguel and I were quiet on the way back to the trailer park. He stopped at the gate. So, not all your cousins are really cousins, I remarked. He shrugged. You have the family you're born with, and the family you choose. And Rosa? I asked. She's really my second cousin. Likes you, you know, Miguel said. Weren't you the one who said she might eliminate me? I reminded him. Miguel grinned. She might. Doesn't mean she doesn't like you. His grin faded. What are you going to do? I don't know. Beth seeing the SEC guy is an ethics violation. I'd rather leave it alone, I said. But she won't leave you alone. Don't do anything stupid. You need help. I'll help, okay? Miguel offered. I nodded, unsure. He drove off, and I walked through the dim trailer park. Hey, pervert, Rosa called out. I looked over at Rosa's trailer. She was sitting outside. Hey, Rosa, I greeted her. Bad day? She asked. Yeah, everything I thought I knew about my wife is nonsense, I replied. She held up a bottle. Need a drink? Tapatio from Jalisco? I approached. That's the good stuff. Don't waste it on me. Rosa smiled. I've been there with my ex. I can spare some. She patted the chair next to hers. You promised to let me know what's going on. I slumped into the chair and took the bottle. I don't have a cup. Tequila eliminates germs. You won't catch my cooties, she said. I took a sip, more worried about you catching my bad luck. So what happened? She leaned forward. I told her the whole story. What does that mean? She asked. It looks like Beth has been setting me up for years. She was with the SEC guy over a year before the investigation, and Voorhees 2 years before that. She tried to get Fish to put me back in prison, I explained. Rosa pulled her feet up into her chair. How long were you married? Just over 4 years, I replied. So she was with Voorhees practically from the beginning, Rosa noted. We sat quietly for a bit. Think she married you to set you up? She asked. That thought makes me feel even worse, I admitted. She took the bottle, sipped, and handed it back. Manipulating men is what some women do best. She looked at me. What are you going to do? Get revenge? I shook my head. I just want out of this. But that won't work. Rosa held up the empty bottle, then stood up. Maybe another bottle would help. Think it through. I think I have one inside. She walked to her door, and when she opened it, the light seemed to dissolve her robe as she looked back at me. You coming? She asked. I followed, entranced by the sway of her hips. She paused, and the chihuahua darted under a chair. The bottle's in my bedroom, she said, pointing to an open door. As I stepped closer, she turned and smiled wickedly, her robe open. I pulled her against me, and she grinned wider. I warned you. Manipulating men is what some women do best, Rosa said, hooking a leg around me. She started to speak, but I kissed her. She shrugged off her robe, and I carried her to the bedroom, the chihuahua howling from under the chair. Later, Rosa lay half across me, waking up. She smiled. Wow, you must have been saving that up. I'm a little tender. She glanced at the floor. I'm throwing that pillow away. Yeah, washing won't help, I agreed. She laughed. I'll just buy a new one. I ran my fingers through her hair. I haven't had an active social life. You didn't hook up with that old lady at the club, she said. No, I replied. She laughed. I know you didn't. I was keeping an eye on you, I said. Fair. I had an eye on you too, she teased. And I lied. That stuff at the club was for your benefit. Rosa grew serious. I need to tell you the truth. I knew you'd be at the club. That's why I went. I'm going to eliminate Miguel, I muttered. He didn't know. He asked for a good place, so I decided to show up, Rosa explained. Why? I asked. Because I needed to stop being a witch. I've been angry since my ex-husband. I thought you might understand. Besides, I got a good look at you before you picked up that sombrero, pervert, she said. She giggled. So you wiggled your bum at me. It worked, didn't it? You drooled over me every time I went outside. Is that why you wear that robe? I asked. Sometimes I'm an exhibitionist. You've found my weakness, she admitted, and I squeezed her bum. A knock interrupted. Rosa put on her robe and answered the door while I got dressed. Rosa looked at me, puzzled. This girl needs to talk to you. Kelsey stepped in. Hey, Jose, got a minute? Rosa gets to hear it, I said. Okay, Kelsey sighed. But this doesn't go to Bjorn. Okay, I nodded. When the circus went bankrupt, I was screwed. I started street performing in small cons like 3-Card Monte, Kelsey began. Bjorn said you did street magic, I noted. Toughest kind. Just you and the marks. No stage sets, no assistants. She grinned. I was good at it. Rosa asked, what does that have to do with everything here? Kelsey blew out a breath. I heard stuff about big cons and helped on a couple. Bjorn thinks he rescued me before I got in too deep, and he mostly did. I didn't do anything really bad, but being broke in the city sucks. I don't want to tarnish what he did. He doesn't deserve that. I looked at Rosa, who smiled gently and laughed softly. I understand. Kelsey grinned at Rosa and gave an exaggerated wink before looking at me. I think you're looking at this the wrong way. Why? I asked. Because you're wondering why they're targeting you. This is just another big con, and you're not the mark. She paused. No offense, Joseph, but you can't be the mark. You don't have anything worth taking. She glanced at Rosa. No money or valuable stuff. I know, I grimaced. Then why set me up? Why try to put me back in prison? You're not the mark. You're part of the con. You're the distraction, Kelsey explained. I stared at her. I don't know what that means, but it doesn't sound good. It means you're the diversion. They want everyone looking at you, not them, she clarified. Rosa asked, how do we stop it? Kelsey grinned. Just convince the mark they're being conned. I had a sudden realization. Damn it, I'm an idiot. Why? Rosa asked, puzzled. The Seychelles. We were going to Fiji for our honeymoon, but Beth suddenly changed it to the Seychelles. Why does that matter? Rosa questioned. Banking laws. She sent me deep-sea fishing one day while she stayed at the spa. I bet she set up an account in person so there'd be no trail to her, I explained. Isn't there anyone you can call? Rosa asked. The SEC has a reporting mechanism, but that'd probably just tip them off, I said. I almost choked on the tequila. Who watches the Watchmen? Rosa smiled. Why not both the DOJ and the FBI? The FBI and IRS have websites for reporting fraud, so I used the library computer to report it, hoping it would cause enough trouble for Beth and her cohorts to leave me alone. I reported to P.O. Anderson and worked with Miguel and the crew until the end of the harvest. Then I found a job making donuts, which was easier, but I missed the old crew. The hours matched Rosa's, and we were pretty much living together, so life was good. But it couldn't stay that easy. As I was nuzzling Rosa's neck and grabbing her bum while she set the table, a harsh knock sounded. Rosa glared at the door, trying to calm her breathing. Damn it. If Leonard's here to borrow my robe again, the answer is no. It wasn't Leonard. It was 2 deputies and a couple of guys in suits. I recognized the deputies. The older plainclothes man held up his credentials. Joseph Bateman, I nodded, seeing Leonard and Maisie peering out from Leonard's trailer. I'm Special Agent Tanner with the FBI. We need you to come to the field office to answer a few questions. Rosa clamped onto my arm. Are you arresting him? No, we just have a few questions. I looked at Rosa. I probably need to do this. She reluctantly let me go, but not before taking cell phone pictures of the agents and whispering something in Spanish to one of the deputies. He paled, likely from a pass-away threat. As we drove away, I saw Leonard and Maisie heading to Rosa's trailer. At the FBI field office, I was put in an interview room with nauseatingly white walls, gray carpet, and a dull gray table, and told to wait. After 20 minutes, a clean-cut guy in a black suit entered, placed his credentials on the table, opened a folder, and introduced himself. Mr. Bateman, I'm Senior Special Agent Michael Rivera from the Criminal Cyber Response and Services Branch in D.C. We received your tip and need clarification for an ongoing FBI-IRS investigation. We appreciate your assistance. I stared in surreal horror. Miguel. Ignoring my whisper, he pointed to a line item on the list. You mentioned the money may have been moved to an account in the Seychelles. We need to narrow down which institution your ex-wife may have used. For the next 2 hours, SSA Rivera went over every detail of the suspected plot. I had to handwrite and sign statements, review maps and honeymoon itineraries, all while Rivera acted like we'd never met. Thankfully, there were no references to Isabel, Bjorn, or Kelsey. They were supposed to be family. After we finished, he gave me a perfect government official handshake and thanked me for assisting in the investigation. I walked into Rosa's trailer with silence roaring in my ears. She was waiting for me. Are you okay? She asked, concerned. Did you know about Michael? I asked. Michael who? She recoiled. Miguel. What about Miguel? Is he okay? She asked, worried. He's an FBI agent, I revealed. The shock and disbelief on Rosa's face was the most comforting thing I could have seen. Miguel? Are you serious? He told me he came out here because he had trouble in New York. Her voice trailed off, and she stood silent for a moment before launching into rapid Spanish. I was probably lucky I didn't understand. After a few minutes, I wondered if Liam would let me hide under the chair with him. Rosa, I am so sorry, I apologized. She stopped and blinked. For what? For even thinking you could have... I trailed off. She shook her head. You asked. You didn't accuse me of anything. That hijo de puta lied to us. His family. We saw the arrests and trial on TV. The FBI and IRS investigation into SEC corruption was in the news for a year. Beth took a plea deal, but still got 15 years after turning over the money she'd stashed overseas. The SEC investigator got 20 years with no plea deal. More people were involved than I thought, which made me uneasy considering Beth had drawn most of them into her plan. I was lucky I wasn't a CDC case study. Most got 5 years, though one IT guy only got 18 months. Rosa's only comment on Beth was, "You were married to that skinny witch. I thought you liked women with real bums." What can I say? I was deprived for 4 years. I'm making up for it now. She shot me a fake scowl, but the corner of her mouth twisted into a smile. I know. I can't even wear shorts. You keep leaving tooth marks all over me. She still spent most of her time off wearing just her skimpy robe. If anything, her exhibitionist streak had gotten worse. I didn't argue, though she did occasionally have a tooth mark or two. The court was looking at vacating my conviction. During the investigation, someone admitted that Voorhees had planted the pills in my car. Beth had orchestrated it. I wasn't holding my breath, though. At the speed the courts moved, I'd be done with parole before they got to it. P.O. Anderson had gone hands-off and even told me about the move to vacate. Fish retired quietly without charges, and I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but Rosa said she suspected he wouldn't have gone through with it. That was good enough for me. For months after Beth's sentencing, Rosa and I met Bjorn and Kelsey at the salsa club. We also ran into them at street festivals and sometimes met at the club for dinner and drinks. Dancing with a double-jointed clown was a trip, and watching Kelsey perform street magic tricks on patrons never got old. One evening, we arrived early. I grabbed a table while Rosa freshened up. I had just waved a waitress over when Miguel pulled out a chair. I'll get this round, man. I owe you one. Miguel spoke to the waitress briefly and then sat down. Miguel? Or is it Michael? I asked. He sighed. Miguel, you might want to keep a clear path to the door. Rosa's pissed at you. Yeah, I figured. You earned that doing your job. I bought it. I thought you were my friend. You're good. Lots of training. Bjorn told me he suspected something. He just didn't think FBI. He thought maybe State Narcotics Task Force, I said. I wasn't even there for you, you know. We had an op running, but came up empty. I was already in place when the employment agency dropped you there. Blind luck, Miguel explained. The FBI stalks? Low-level pill parolees? Really? What kind of crap is that? I asked, incredulous. Everyone was convinced you had the money hidden. Probably 6 agencies watching, waiting for you to run. Took me a while to suspect you weren't in on it, Miguel admitted. Why didn't you say something? I demanded. I couldn't be sure for a while. Once we learned an SEC investigator was involved, I was stuck. The rules are simple. The FBI should have investigated, but none of our evidence was legal, and the politics were complicated. We couldn't legally initiate an investigation with what we had, he said. But if somebody lodged a whistleblower complaint, you'd have probable cause, I suggested. He nodded. It worked, didn't it? We figured out why she kept targeting you after you were out. You were supposed to be the fall guy, but they didn't realize that. There wasn't enough evidence to really railroad you. So, when you got out after a few months, the SEC and IRS were on high alert. Beth couldn't touch the money without drawing attention. If I went back to prison for a long time, the pressure would be off and she'd be free and clear, I concluded. That's too cold, Miguel said, shaking his head. Yeah, I interviewed her. She's probably a full-blown sociopath. They're drawn to money and power and end up in politics, law, and finance. Cold as ice and damn good liars. Convincing as hell, I said. Kind of the pot calling the kettle black there, Miguel, I noted. He shrugged. Fair, still. You're lucky you're alive. She probably figured liquidating you would draw too much attention. She did ask about you, though. wondering why you hadn't tried to see her and talk. What the hell is there to talk about? She was never who I thought she was, I said bitterly. Miguel put his beer down. If she's like other sociopaths I've met, she wants to know she won in some way. See you break down or get upset. See your reaction when you realize you were played. He laughed. It really pissed her off when I told her you screwed up her plan, cost her all the money, and put her in prison. Pretty one-sided win there. I was just trying to stop everything, I said. I know, but it worked for me. Sociopaths are usually narcissists. She tried to show how she won by explaining stuff we didn't know, put 2 more a-holes behind bars, and recovered a bit more money, Miguel concluded. Rosa suddenly appeared by the table, glaring at Miguel. She hissed something, and he raised his hands in surrender. I know. My mom relayed your, opinion to me. I'll never hear the end of it, so thanks, Miguel said. Rosa glanced between us. I shrugged. He's explaining what happened. She pulled a chair next to mine, gripping my arm possessively and still glaring at Miguel. He took a sip of his beer. What else do you want to know? I asked. How many people were involved? Are you sure you want to know? Miguel asked, frowning. 10, but 2 were women. 11 if you count the IT geek who botched the frame job on you. He only got a few blowjobs in the server room. He rolled on everyone as soon as we pressured him. He got 18 months, Miguel explained. 18 months in prison for a few blowjobs. Damn, I shook my head. Rosa elbowed me with a grin. Mine aren't worth that. Of course they are, I replied. Oh God, too much information. Miguel held his hands up as Rosa laughed wickedly. Things got quiet, the joking reminding us of how close we'd been. I turned my beer bottle a few times. What do you want, Miguel? I asked. I wanted to set things right. Family, you know, he said. I had bitter replies in my head, but let them go. Are we Jose and Miguel? Yeah, cousins. Michael and Joseph, not so much, Miguel replied. I looked at Rosa. I think I can live with that. She studied him. You ever do that again, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Her tone was certain, not venomous. He nodded. I know, and I deserve it. Thanks for giving me a chance to make things right. Rosa nodded, mollified by his apology. He finished his beer. I need to apologize to Isabel. I talked to Bjorn and Kelsey. That's how I knew you'd be here. Bjorn understands, but Kelsey will take a while. She doesn't trust easily, but when she does, it's wholehearted. I messed that up. I nodded. Despite Kelsey's street smarts, she had a precious naivete that Rosa loved. He stood up, pulled an envelope from his back pocket, and smiled. With a bit of irony, I asked if I could deliver this personally. What is it? I asked, wary. The adjudication on the IRS reward money for reporting tax evasion. It's not a fortune, but it should help. It's a percentage of the taxes owed on underreported income minus taxes and other deductions. But it'll help you get back on your feet, he said. He paused. If they vacate your conviction, will you go back to your job? I shook my head. No, there will always be suspicion. No one would sponsor me for a Series 7 again. The donut shop owner is thinking about selling. I'm managing it now and looking into bank loans. It's affordable, and the profits are good. Miguel snickered. A big shot donut shop owner. Jesus, you're saying it wrong. He works at the shop. I hired him and Alejandro, I corrected. Still hard to picture, Miguel said. Money is just money, Miguel. I have family now, I said. I saw a flash of pain before he walked away. I opened the envelope and sorted the papers. The total was over $500,000. I showed it to Rosa. She smiled. No problem buying the donut shop now, and we can get you a nicer engagement ring. She studied her quarter-carat ring. No, I'm keeping this one. You worked hard to save up for it. That means a lot more. I squeezed her thigh. What are we going to do with the money left over after buying the shop? She looked up. There are a lot of empty lots in the trailer park. Maybe we could get a double-wide trailer with a big deck to have everyone over, like Leonard and Maisie. Maybe even Miguel in a month or two. She looked at the door. I nodded. With a barbecue grill, patio furniture, and a good stereo system, that sounds about right. Rosa leaned against me. Maybe we could make one of the bedrooms a nursery, you know, in the future. Her voice was measured, but I heard her uncertainty. Maybe not too far in the future, okay? Maybe get a 4-bedroom one. You never know, I said, trying to reassure her. Rosa sighed. Maybe I'll be the one leaving tooth marks on your bum tonight, she teased. Pervert, I said, and she giggled. You better believe it, Rosa replied.
You generously handed your ticket to a woman you didn't know. Nothing seems more paramount than the company's affairs. Unfortunately, you've been terminated. Even when the boss told me I was fired, I wasn't too shocked. Instead, I felt like I had pictured the true corporate culture of this company and almost blurted out, "I'm better off without this place anyway." Just then, "Excuse me," the panicked manager rushed into the boss's office. "Sir, our company is being featured as breaking news on TV. What's going on? Who is this person?" The faces of COO and my boss turned pale as they looked at the DV screen. The person on the DV screen was me. My name is Arlo. Here in New York City, I work at a healthcare products and related service provider. I belong to the sales department. Guess I have another membership quota to meet this month. Sales is rewarding but tough, that's the only way to put it. Our company's gym, based on the concept of a gym anyone can easily access at any time, has been expanding rapidly due to the recent health boom, making our business grow fast. The idea of easily accessible for everyone was revolutionary in the world of gyms, which used to be seen as intimidating to join. But there was a fatal flaw in this aggressive business strategy. "What's going on with your gym? It's always so crowded, I can barely use the machines. Why is it fully booked for the month?" "I joined because you promised I could avail at any time. Despite the demand, there were simply too many members for one gym. Lately, we've been receiving daily complaints from dissatisfied customers. Still, all we hear from the top is, increase the membership numbers." Are we really going to keep adding members in this situation? I've been growing doubtful of the company's willingness to address the concerns raised by the customers. One day, I couldn't hold back any longer and decided to talk to the sales manager. "Excuse me, manager, I have something I'd like to discuss." "What now?" "In the middle of all this chaos?" "Make it quick." "Yes, sorry," as the manager, not even looking up from his paperwork, dismissively gestures. I sigh and start speaking. "Manager, you're aware of the alarming numbers of complaints from customers, right?" "Yeah, so what?" "I think we're adding to our membership numbers recklessly. We should seriously address the complaints and work on solutions." "Oh, Arlo, you don't get it. That's the problem with the younger generation," the manager interrupts me, scratching his head in irritation. "Whatever we do, it costs money. We need to increase sales before we can think about solutions." "Well, that might be true, but still, just focus on increasing the membership, you worthless employee. Ramp up the sales pitches to all the media for advertising." "Got it?" "Understood." It was like talking to a wall, but when the higher-ups say this, there's not much else to do. I swallowed my frustration and quietly returned to my work, following the manager's orders. I started pitching our ads to various media outlets. Perhaps because of these efforts, some good news came my way. "Really? Is that true?" "Yes, we're interested in a tie-up with an RTV program." The caller was from the Alaska Broadcasting Company. Excitingly, they were considering not just commercial films but also a TV show collaboration. "Thank you so much. We'd be delighted to work with you." "Thank you, but the show's schedule is quite tight. We'd like to meet as soon as possible if that's all right with you." "Any time is fine. I'll be there." "Thank you. I'll send you the schedule by mail right away." "Thank you very much. I appreciate it." Even after hanging up, my hands were still shaking with surprise and joy. All right, can't just sit around now. A DV collaboration could be a significant achievement. Trying to contain my excitement, I booked a flight to head for the DV station's meeting. And then the day of the big meeting with the TV station arrived. I got to the airport early to catch my flight. I've got quite some time before departure. Maybe I was too eager as I arrived at the airport earlier than I expected. I was thinking about going to a nearby coffee shop to review my presentation materials when I noticed something. "Excuse me, are there any seats available on the flight to Anchorage? I really need to get on the next flight." A woman was desperately pleading with the airline counter staff. "Just a moment, please. The staff, looking confused, fiddled with their computer and wore a troubled expression. "I'm sorry, but all the flights to Anchorage today are fully booked." "Oh no, there's still time before the next flight, and we can put you on a waiting list for cancellations." "All right, please do that." After completing some simple procedures, the woman walked away from the counter looking unsteady. I wonder if she is okay. I found myself watching her. She sat down on a bench, covering her mouth with her hand, her shoulders shaking. It looked like she was crying. The next flight to Anchorage, huh? I glanced at the ticket in my hand. No, that's not right. I was here for work, after all. Chiding myself for even thinking about it, I started walking towards the coffee shop. As I passed by the woman sitting on the bench, her cell phone rang. "Hello, Jess, it's booked. I'm on a waiting list." "Oh my, still unconscious?" "I'm okay. I'll try to get back today." Yes. Her trembling voice was audible as she spoke to the person on the other end of the phone. What happened? An accident or an illness? Someone important to her seemed to be in serious trouble. Oh, that's why she was so desperate. Stop it, don't think about it anymore. Shaking my head to clear these thoughts, I went past the woman. I bought a cup of coffee, sat down, and spread out my materials. I wanted to focus, but I couldn't stop thinking about the woman nearby. I can't do anything for her, murmuring to myself. I started to question, is that really true? I had what she needed right now. The more I thought, the more my heart raced, the more restless I felt. Come on, what am I even thinking? Unable to sit still any longer, I downed my lukewarm coffee, gathered my things, and left the coffee shop. I retraced my steps back. The woman was still sitting on the same bench. "Excuse me." She looked up in surprise when I spoke to her. Her eyes, wide open, were wet with tears. "Are you all right?" "I'm sorry, yes, I'm fine. She tried to put on a brave face, smiling, but her trembling lips betrayed her distress. The last bit of my hesitation, telling me not to get involved, vanished at that moment. What happened? I'm sorry. I saw you over there at the counter earlier. You were waiting for a ticket cancellation, right? My daughter was involved in a traffic accident and taken to the hospital." "Your daughter?" "I came here from Alaska for a business trip. My return flight was scheduled for tomorrow, so I couldn't get back immediately. I can't be there for my daughter." She choked up mid-sentence and started crying. I hurriedly pulled out a handkerchief and handed it to her. "Please use this." "I'm sorry. Can you stand up? I have a ticket for the next flight to Anchorage. Let's change the passenger name to yours at the counter. But hurry, it's almost boarding time." I took her arm to help her stand and walked her to the counter. "Excuse me, I'd like to transfer my ticket to her, please." "Yes, sir. You're the lady on the waiting list, right? Just a moment, please." The counter staff, apparently concerned about her as well, began the transfer process swiftly without hesitation. "Wait, what about you?" "It's okay for me, but not for you. You need to go now, or else you'll surely regret it." "Thank you so much." "Thank you." She looked somehow relieved from the worry, tears streaming down her face. I gently shook my head and handed her the ticket. "Go to your daughter, please." "Thank you so much. Here, this is my card. May I have yours?" "Of course." We exchanged business cards. Somewhat belatedly, her name turned out to be Sarah. "You're Arlo, right? Thank you so much. I'll never forget this kindness. I'll make sure to thank you properly once things settle down." "No need for thanks. Just take care, and I hope your daughter will be okay, Jess." "Thank you. Thank you so much." I watched her repeatedly turn back with tearful eyes until she disappeared from view. Well, I really did it. I sighed, watching the plane I was supposed to be on take off from the lounge. Strangely, I felt no regret. Switching gears, I called the DV station I was supposed to have a meeting with. Hello, this is Arlo. Arlo, good to hear from you. Is your flight on schedule? Actually, about that. I only told the DV station representative about missing the flight. I see. That's a bit of a problem. I'm truly sorry for this sudden change. No need to apologize. I understand something must have come up. However, we'll need to reschedule our tie-up discussion. I'll contact you once we have a new plan. But please understand that the project might be cancelled. Of course. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. After a polite goodbye, I hung up. After a short wait, all right, time to head back to the office and face the music. My workday was far from over. Resolving to deal with whatever came next, I decided to head back to the office from the airport. Arlo, do you realize what you've done? My manager shouted at me when I reported back to the office. You missed a tie-up with a DV station. Do you have any idea how big of an opportunity that was? I'm very sorry. And what's this about giving your ticket to someone in need, Arlo? What were you doing at the airport? This is work. Don't mix personal matters with work. You're absolutely right. I have no excuse. Seriously, what were you thinking? I knew I was completely at fault for this situation. With the manager still furious, I kept my head bowed. Hey, Arlo? Yes? I'll be reporting this matter to the CO, so be prepared. Yes, I understand. That's enough, Arlo. Just go home for today. I can't concentrate with you around. Yes, I'm very sorry for what happened. Excuse me, I apologized deeply one last time and began to pack up to go home. My colleagues looked at me with concern, but none of them spoke up. I'm sorry for any trouble I caused everyone. I'll be heading out now. After I made another apology at the door, I left the office. The next day, I was called to the CO's office first thing in the morning. It seemed my mishap had reached the CO's ears sooner than I expected. I knocked on the CO's office door. By this time, I was ready to face the consequences. CO, it's Arlo. Come in. Excuse me, I entered the CO's office. The CO, looking stern, was leaning on his desk. I walked up and took a deep breath. CEO, I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience I've caused. So, you understand that you did something wrong? Yes. So why did you do it? Are you trying to damage my company's reputation? I had no such intention. Then what was your intention? Well, could I make him understand if I explained the situation? With a glimmer of hope, I recounted the entire incident at the airport. Your name was Arlo, right? Yes. Aren't you misunderstanding something? Our company doesn't run a charity. I apologize. I was wrong. If apologies were enough, things would be easy, but they're not. We don't need someone with your mindset in our company. The CEO handed me a document. It was a termination notice. Complete the handover within the period stated here. Make sure your final task is done well. As I stood up, the CEO patted my shoulder lightly. I understand. I'll accept it without any words. Unfortunately, there was no room for defense, and the CEO urged me to leave his office. So it's come to this, huh? Though the outcome was arguably the worst possible, I had no regrets. This was the right thing to do, wasn't it? I felt strangely liberated and found myself reminiscing about the past, the days shortly after I had moved to the city to study at the university. Arlo, calm down and listen. A sudden call from my mother. What? The news she delivered plunged my world into darkness. My sister, who had been receiving treatment at the hospital, had passed away. How could this happen? She looked fine when I went home for the holidays. Her condition suddenly deteriorated. Just hours ago, she was okay, but she's gone. Mom, I didn't know what to say to my mother, who couldn't hold back her sobs on the other end of the phone. Hand over the phone, Arlo. Can you hear me, Dad? Arlo, can you come home right away? Yeah, I'll head there right after this. Do that, Arlo. Yeah. In the end, she said she wanted to see you one last time, and then she passed away. My gosh, sorry. No, don't apologize. Just come back safely, okay? I hung up the phone, feeling dazed. Back in my hometown, I used to visit her daily, but after moving, those visits became less frequent. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tears flowed freely. In the end, I couldn't do anything for my sister as her brother. That regret of not being there for my sister's last moments weighed heavily on me. Perhaps that's why, at the airport yesterday, I saw myself in the desperate woman's situation. I hope Sarah is okay. I had no regrets about giving her my plane ticket. I hope she made it in time, and if possible, I wished for her daughter's recovery. My heart was filled with these hopes. A regret like that is better avoided. I hoped that her tears would turn into smiles. With these thoughts, I returned to the office to start the handover process. Nearly a month later, after successfully handing over all my responsibilities and clients to my colleagues, I faced my last day at the company without any problems. Thank you for everything. I hummed. Arlo, make sure you say goodbye to the CEO too. Yes, sir. I nodded to him, who spoke without looking at me, and left the office. Then I headed straight to the CEO's office. Today was my last day. I had no regrets or unresolved feelings. CEO, excuse me, I entered the CEO's office as usual. The COO was sitting at his desk. I'm leaving effective today. I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience I caused. Indeed you should. Ideally, I would have liked to demand compensation for the damages, but be thankful I didn't go that far. The CEO let out an exaggerated sigh. Still, you've practically thrown away your career. It's pitiful. I wonder what kind of upbringing leads someone to turn out like you. My parents have nothing to do with this, huh? I wonder, giving your business trip ticket to a stranger, what a ridiculous story. The CEO raised his voice and slammed his hand on the desk. I remained silent, continuing to stare at him. Listen, since you seem unaware, I'll tell you this as a parting gift. In work, nothing is more important than a company that you don't understand. This is precisely why people like you get fired despite the barrage of criticism. I wasn't too shaken. Instead, I felt like I had pictured the true corporate culture of this company and almost blurted out, I'm better off without this place anyway. However, before I could speak, I was interrupted. Excuse me, the manager rushed into the CEO's office in a fluster. What now? You're making a racket, said the CEO. Sorry, CEO, but this is urgent. Please check the news right now, urged by the flustered manager. The CEO turned on the DV in his office with an irritated gesture. The screen showed a breaking news story that seemed to be a positive piece. So this man gave you the ticket? Yes, thanks to him, I could rush to my daughter's side. The voice sounded familiar. I instinctively looked up at the DV screen. There was Sarah holding a little girl and a man standing beside her. Sarah. I was startled to see her, and even the CEO and manager looked shocked, their eyes wide open, their gaze fixed on the middle-aged man standing next to Ellis. This man is, indeed, it's him. I'm sure it's him. I've met him a few times in TV-related work. He's the former producer Jacob who used to work at a DV station in the city. The CEO audibly swallowed. On the DV screen, Anna was smiling as she responded to the interviewer. Someone from this company gave me his ticket. Thanks to him, I was able to reach my daughter. This is the company that's behind the popular gym chain, right? I hear your father has connections with this company. Then the microphone turned to the man next to Anna. It turns out he was her father. Yes, it's true. I later found out he was supposed to have a business meeting with my company. What a coincidence, absolutely. But he didn't know that fact. I hope this news feature lets everyone know, despite the controversies surrounding that company, they have such amazing employees, he said firmly, and Sarah, nodding and smiling beside him, continued, as long as they have employees like him, the company will be fine. I'm sure the bad rumors will disappear soon. Anna, with a beaming smile, hugged the little girl in her arms and added, I'll visit soon to express my gratitude. Please wait for me. With that, she waved her hand, and the screen switched to an advertisement. In the CEO's office, there was an awkward silence. The manager and the CEO were speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't hear. We're sorry, Arlo. Like this, please forgive us. Please show us mercy, they pleaded. Hold on a second, forgive us? Mercy? What for? I was a bit taken aback by their desperation but curious about what they were about to say. We had no idea that the woman you helped was the daughter of Mr. Kit. I'm sorry for overstepping, but please let us withdraw your dismissal, Arlo. No, Mr. Arlo, the CEO is going this far. Come on, you must be relieved not to be fired, right? It was a complete turnaround. They probably realized that my being fired would look bad now that Mr. Kit knew about it. As I stared down at them in disbelief, the CEO looked up at me with a sly grin. How about it? If you want, we can offer you any position. You can even take his place if you want. Excuse me? I watched in amazement as the CEO and manager desperately tried to win me over. I let out an exaggerated sigh. I've already been fired, so it's no longer my concern. No, wait, please. I quickly sidestepped the CEO and manager as they tried to cling to my feet and said, then, thank you for everything. I left the CEO's office with a smile, ignoring their shouts behind me. The day after I left the company with a clear conscience, I received a message from Sarah. She was in the city and invited me for a meal as a way of saying thanks. Feeling a bit nervous, I made my way to the designated location. It was a restaurant in a high-end hotel, a place I'd never been to before. Arlo, I really can't thank you enough for what you did. Thanks to you, my daughter is safe and now very healthy. I'm just glad to hear she's doing well. I saw you on TV, your daughter is adorable, just like you. Arlo, you're quite the charmer, aren't you? I hope I'm not getting you in trouble with your husband. I'm single, actually. I got divorced before my daughter was born. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. It's okay, don't worry about it. Anna smiled softly as she sipped her wine. Arlo, did you take the day off from work today? About that, I actually got fired from my job. What? Sorry, after all the praise you gave me on TV. That's terrible. Do you have another job lined up? Not yet, actually. Then would you consider working at the DV station my father is with? Sarah's eyes sparkled as she looked at me earnestly. It's in Alaska though, but I assure you, you won't regret it. Really? Are you sure that's okay? Of course, let me just call my dad and confirm. Ellis quickly pulled out her cell phone, her movements a blend of excitement and urgency. I had only met Sarah twice, yet I'd seen so many sides of her, tears, laughter, and now this flurry of excitement. Arlo, he says you're more than welcome. After finishing the call, Sarah turned to me with a beaming smile, the happiest and most beautiful expression I'd seen on her yet. Time passed, and thanks to Sarah's introduction, I transitioned to a new job at the DV station in Alaska where her father was a producer. Ridiculous firing a guy like you. That company is doomed. Upon learning about my dismissal, Sarah's father used his influence to cancel the nearly finalized partnership deal his station had with the company where once I was an employee. It made sense, after all, I had been the one who initiated and developed that project. Meanwhile, my old nest, plagued by a pileup of customer complaints and an increasing number of cancellations, was now teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. It's like they got what was coming to them, indeed, such a shame. Don't worry about it, Sarah, all right? She looked downcast, and I offered her a reassuring smile. As time went by, Sarah and I spent more and more time together, and now we were in a relationship, considering marriage. Ellis, there's something I want to ask you. What is it? I've been thinking, meeting Ellis that day, it might have been destiny. Destiny? I'm glad you're smiling, Sarah. Your smile is what I love the most. Arlo, you always know just what to say. We looked at each other and shared a light-hearted laugh. I promised myself that I would make Sarah, her beloved daughter, and any future children we might have happy, a vow to make up for the sister I couldn't protect, to cherish them always.
Welcome to my channel, where every story comes to life. Dive into captivating narratives that spark your imagination. Let's start today's new narrative story. Imagine thinking your life was perfect. Married to your best friend, raising a wonderful child, living in a beautiful house by the beach, until one simple notification turned your entire world upside down. 4. Ethan Blake, a 36-year-old financial advisor from Sydney. This wasn't just a nightmare. It was his reality. What he thought was a loving marriage became a web of deceit, unraveling in ways he never expected. Join me on this emotional roller coaster as we dive into a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and a man's quest for justice. This is not just another tale of infidelity. It's a story about finding truth where lies once thrived. Ethan Blake and his wife, Chloe Blake, live in the vibrant northern beaches of Sydney, a picturesque area known for its ocean views, affluent residents, and laid-back coastal lifestyle. Ethan is a 36-year-old financial advisor, a man of routine who works long hours to provide for his family. Chloe, 34, is a yoga instructor who is well loved in their community, admired for her beauty, charm, and graceful demeanor. Together, they have an 8-year-old son named Jack, a curious and energetic boy who is the apple of his father's eye. Their social circle consists of close friends, many of whom envy the seemingly perfect life Ethan and Chloe have. They often host barbecues on weekends, spend time with other families, and take Jack to the beach for surfing lessons. Ethan, though successful in his career, always felt that family was his greatest achievement, until everything changed. It all started on a warm Saturday afternoon. Ethan sat in their spacious backyard, enjoying a cold beer as Jack kicked a football around. The scent of eucalyptus filled the air, and the sound of distant waves crashing onto the shore provided a soothing background. Chloe was lounging on a deck chair, her phone in hand, typing furiously. "Who are you texting?" Ethan asked with a smile, hoping for a light-hearted response. "Oh, just the girls. We're organizing a yoga retreat," Chloe replied without looking up, her voice too casual, too practiced. Ethan didn't think much of it at first, but as the weeks went by, her behavior grew more secretive. She had become glued to her phone, often texting late into the night, locking her screen when he entered the room. Something felt different. They had always shared everything, but now there was a distance between them. Conversations had become more superficial, and their once regular date nights dwindled into rare occasions. Ethan, always the rational thinker, tried to dismiss his suspicions. After all, Chloe was a busy woman, and he knew his long hours at work didn't help. But there was a nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach that he couldn't shake. One evening, while Chloe was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Ethan glanced at it out of curiosity, his eyes landing on a message from someone named Josh. "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Josh? Who the hell was Josh? Ethan's hands trembled as he stared at the message. His mind raced, piecing together every odd behavior Chloe had exhibited over the past few months. He quickly put the phone down when he heard the water stop, his heart pounding in his chest. He spent the next few days in a state of paranoia, watching Chloe closely, replaying moments in his head. Could she really be having an affair? Ethan had never doubted Chloe before, but now every smile, every glance at her phone seemed suspicious. His mind was consumed by the possibility. Unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Ethan decided to take matters into his own hands. Late one night, after Chloe had fallen asleep, he installed a discreet app on her phone that synced her messages to his own. He felt a pang of guilt as he set it up, knowing it was an invasion of privacy. But Ethan needed to know the truth. He couldn't confront her without proof. For the next few days, the app picked up nothing suspicious, The messages were casual, often related to her yoga clients or friends. Ethan began to wonder if he had been overreacting, doubting himself for suspecting her. But just when he was about to uninstall the app, the real bombshell dropped. One evening, as Ethan sat alone in his home office, a series of texts between Chloe and Josh appeared on his screen. He froze, staring at the words, his world crumbling around him. Josh wasn't just some casual acquaintance. He was her lover. Josh, a 31-year-old personal trainer at Chloe's yoga studio, had been having an affair with Chloe for months. The texts were filled with flirtation, intimate details of their encounters, and plans for future meetups. Chloe had told Josh things she hadn't shared with Ethan in years, the emotional depth of their conversations, Saint, even more than the physical betrayal. She had confided in Josh, complained about her marriage, and painted Ethan as the neglectful, absent husband. Ethan's hands shook as he scrolled through the messages, each one more painful than the last. He had given his all to their marriage, to their family. How could she do this to him? To Jack? The next morning, Ethan could barely focus. His mind was racing, filled with a toxic mix of rage, sadness, and confusion. He knew he had to confront Chloe, but the thought of the conversation terrified him. He didn't want to believe it was real, but the messages were undeniable proof. There was no escaping the truth. After Jack left for school, Ethan found Chloe in the kitchen, sipping her morning coffee. She greeted him with a smile, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside him. "Chloe, we need to talk," Ethan said, his voice steady but cold. Chloe looked up, her smile faltering. "What's wrong?" Ethan placed her phone on the counter, unlocked, with the incriminating messages on display. He watched as the color drained from her face. She didn't say a word, but her eyes were filled with guilt. "I know about Josh," Ethan said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I know everything." Chloe's hands trembled as she reached for the phone, her eyes darting over the messages. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized she had been caught. She looked up at Ethan, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan, I'm so sorry." "Sorry? That's all you have to say?" Ethan's voice cracked, his anger rising to the surface. "You've been lying to me for months. How could you do this to us? To Jack?" Chloe broke down, sobbing into her hands. She tried to explain, to justify her actions. She said she had felt lonely, neglected, that Ethan had been too focused on work and not enough on their relationship. She claimed that Josh had given her the attention she had been craving, that it had started as an emotional connection and spiraled into something more. But Ethan wasn't buying it. They had both been busy. They had both struggled with balancing work and family, but he had never strayed. He had never even considered it. Chloe's betrayal wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, a selfish, deliberate choice. Ethan walked away from the conversation, unable to process the magnitude of what had just happened. He couldn't look at Chloe without feeling a wave of disgust and anger. He couldn't believe that the woman he had loved and trusted for over a decade had done this to him. Over the next few days, Ethan thought about his next move. He wasn't going to make any rash decisions, but he wasn't going to let Chloe off easy either. He wanted justice, for himself and for Jack. First, Ethan contacted a lawyer and began the process of filing for divorce. He made sure that their assets would be divided fairly and that Jack would be protected in the custody arrangements. Chloe had no idea that Ethan was moving so quickly behind the scenes. She thought she still had time to fix things, to repair the damage she had caused. But Ethan had no intention of letting her back into his life. Next, Ethan started subtly unraveling Chloe's reputation. They had a tight-knit circle of friends, many of whom admired Chloe for her grace and beauty. Slowly, Ethan began telling close friends about what had happened. He didn't embellish the truth or paint himself as a victim. He simply laid out the facts, allowing others to draw their own conclusions. Word spread fast. Chloe's perfect image began to crumble. Friends who once admired her now whispered behind her back. Their social circle, once filled with barbecues and weekend outings, now avoided her. Josh, the younger man she had risked everything for, quickly distanced himself from her as well. He wasn't interested in being involved in the fallout of a broken marriage, especially when it became clear that Chloe's life was unraveling. Chloe found herself isolated, her perfect life shattered. The affair had cost her more than just her marriage. It had cost her friendships, respect, and the life she had carefully crafted. Ethan, on the other hand, slowly began to rebuild his life. The divorce was painful, and adjusting to shared custody of Jack was difficult, but he was determined to move forward. He threw himself into his work, focusing on expanding his business and securing a stable future for himself and Jack. He also spent more time with Jack, making sure that his son knew he was loved and supported. They took weekend trips to the beach, went on hikes, and explored Sydney together. Jack, though young, sensed the tension between his parents, but Ethan made sure to shield him from the worst of it. He didn't want his son to carry the weight of their broken marriage. One afternoon, as Ethan and Jack walked along the shoreline, the sun setting behind them, Ethan felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. The pain of Chloe's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer consumed him. He had taken back control of his life, and he was moving forward, one step at a time. And that, my friends, is how Ethan discovered the double life his wife had been leading, hidden behind the simplicity of a mobile chat. It's a stark reminder that betrayal often starts small, with the secrets we think we can keep hidden. But the truth has a way of coming to light, no matter how deeply it's buried. What would you do if you were in Ethan's shoes? How would you handle the situation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.
Life, as I knew it, had always felt predictable yet fulfilling. Growing up in Byron Bay, I basked in the serenity of a close-knit community where each face was familiar. My high school years, however, were anything but typical. Amidst balancing teenage dreams and responsibilities, Shauna entered my life. She became my confidant, the friend who understood my quirks and silences better than anyone. When Maddie, our daughter, was born, my world shifted dramatically. At just 18, I embraced fatherhood, believing that love and determination could anchor us through life's challenges. Shauna and I tied the knot soon after, convinced we were building the perfect family. But as the years passed, cracks began to form. We transitioned from high school sweethearts to business-like co-parents, our connection morphing into an enduring friendship rather than a romantic partnership. In my early 20s, I founded Other Gaming, a company that grew beyond my wildest dreams. Amidst expanding operations and sleepless nights, I found myself pouring all my energy into my work. Shauna and I amicably divorced, learning the hard way that love and compatibility aren't always synonymous. Yet, we emerged stronger, co-parenting Maddie with the mutual respect that characterized our bond. Life seemed stable until Bridget entered the picture, a whirlwind romance that felt like a fresh start. "Are you aware she's betraying you?" Shayna's voice sliced through the chilly air, her intense gaze holding mine in place. Her question struck with unexpected weight, shattering the tranquility of our afternoon on her porch. We sat in the lingering light of a gray Byron Bay day, the cool breeze tugging at our sweaters, and I grasped for words to respond. Though her statement wasn't entirely unanticipated, hearing it out loud left me stunned. After a few moments, I met her gaze, wishing I could rewind the last 30 seconds. Shauna wouldn't say this without reason. My shoulders tightened, and I looked up at the cold gray sky. For those of us from Byron Bay, Australia, this was the coldest season. The chilly ocean breeze swept over us as we sat bundled in sweaters, sipping hot chocolate in the late afternoon. I avoided her eyes, studying the clouds that signaled rain in the coming hours. With a sigh, I picked up my half-empty mug, focusing on the shifting cloud shapes. The fleeting blue sky felt as unreachable as my happiness. No matter how hard I tried, the weather couldn't distract me from Shauna's words. I glanced at Maddie, my 8-year-old daughter, happily pushing her half-brother Greg on the swings in Shauna's backyard. Minutes passed in silence. Shauna waited for me to process it. She knew I had sensed something off for a while. The excuses, distance, arguments that led to nights in the spare room had turned me moody and withdrawn. But I avoided conflict whenever I could. I sighed again, watching Maddie and Greg play as long-buried emotions surfaced. The tension I'd carried for months tightened into a painful knot. I swallowed hard and looked back at Shanna, who wore an expression of mixed guilt and support. She reached into the oversized bag beside her and pulled out an envelope. "I'm sorry, but Bridget is cheating on you," she repeated. She held the large envelope for a moment, her eyes filled with sympathy. Setting it on the table, she placed her hand over it. "It's all in here. I debated telling you, but you need to know. Do you want it now or later?" she asked, her voice strained. She could see the desperation in my face. This pained her as much as it did me. She'd been my closest friend for most of my life and knew me better than anyone. My name is Timothy, but everyone calls me Tim. I once believed I was happily married to Bridget, but as I stared at the envelope Shanna held, I knew it contained proof that shattered that illusion. Thinking back over the past year, nothing specific stood out, yet doubts about Bridget's loyalty lingered. I glanced at the envelope in Shanna's hand, dread building. This wasn't my first experience with infidelity. We sat in silence as I focused on the envelope, knowing whatever it contained would hurt. "How's Rick?" I asked, my voice trembling as I clutched my cooling hot chocolate. "Rick," she replied simply. Rick, Shanna's husband and a respected family lawyer, had a complex relationship with me. Despite our shared history with Shanna, he'd become a reliable friend over the years. The envelope's contents would determine if Bridget and I were truly over and reveal, if Rick had intervened for my sake or out of resentment. A wave of nausea hit me as I stared at the envelope. "I can't go through this again," I thought. "Tim, you're not alone," Shanna said, sensing my emotions. We were only 25, and the thought of a second divorce before 30 was daunting. Maddie, my 8-year-old daughter, appeared holding her 1-year-old half-brother, Greg. "Mom, Greg needs a diaper change," she announced, nose wrinkled at the smell. Shauna took Greg from Maddie, shot me a knowing glance, and put the envelope away. Maddie didn't need to see its contents. Maddie climbed into my lap, hugging me. "Are you okay, Daddy? What were you and Mom talking about? You're not fighting again, are you?" Her voice held a mix of worry and curiosity. Though Shauna and I weren't together, we'd always been close friends in her eyes. Years ago, Maddie asked why we weren't together if we loved each other so much. We explained more as she grew, but stories of past fights bothered her. Shauna and I had met in high school, becoming best friends, then dating. Teenage pregnancy shocked our families, but they supported us. We married after Maddie's birth, believing it was the right move. However, marriage wasn't right for our friendship. Despite the love we shared, small issues piled up and pulled us apart. I was a programmer and gamer who started my first business at 16. By 18, I was married with a child, working 80, 90-hour weeks. I tried to give Shanna and Maddie everything, but it wasn't enough. We were too young for the stresses we faced. Our parents, though supportive, doubted we'd last and made us sign a prenup. Mine tied to startup funds, hers to protect against potential failure. The business succeeded, leading to my next venture, other gaming. By my early 20s, I had a staff of 50 spread across 3 countries, including programmers, testers, marketers, and admins. My company, Other Gaming, generated around $180 million annually from mostly free-to-play games with microtransactions, purchases for extra resources, time, or power-ups. While our profits weren't as high as some larger gaming companies, investors were always satisfied with our performance. Shauna and I loved our daughter and were best friends. But we weren't in love the way soulmates are. Small, overlooked issues chipped away at our marriage, and my long work hours contributed to its downfall. The fights became frequent, about chores, my work, and Maddie. One night I had a late meeting with investors but forgot to tell Shauna. Meanwhile, she hadn't told me about Maddie's daycare meeting. When I got home, tensions exploded. After yelling at each other, Shanna stormed out, spent the night drinking, and woke up in a stranger's bed. To her credit, Shauna was honest and remorseful. When she confessed, my world shattered. I lashed out, calling her names. She retaliated, accusing me of being a neglectful, boring husband and father. The moment the words left her mouth, she knew it was a mistake. I moved into the spare room that night. Our fights continued for months. I filed for divorce, citing infidelity per the prenup. Shanna, hurt and frustrated, oscillated between apologizing and lashing out when I didn't forgive her. Only around Maddie did we find moments of strained peace. Our parents finally stepped in, confronting us and forcing a truce. One night after they lectured us for hours, they left us alone. We sat in silence for 15 minutes before we started talking. Really talking, for the first time since everything fell apart. "I'm so sorry, Tim," Shauna said, tears in her eyes. "I shouldn't have left that night. I disrespected you. I was stupid and hurt you." I sighed, pained but sincere. "I'm sorry too, Shauna. It hurt, but you're my closest friend. I had to forgive you." She touched my cheek gently. "Thanks, Tim. But where does that leave us?" We talked for hours and agreed that we could only rebuild trust as friends, not as a married couple. For the first time in months, Shanna cried in my arms. We never shared a bed again, but spent more time together, deciding that co-parenting as friends was best. Over 18 months, the divorce process unfolded, and Shanna and I became close friends again, letting go of bitterness and regaining trust. Though we hugged and occasionally shared a friendly kiss, romantic love had faded. I still loved Shauna deeply, but valued her more as a friend. Our marriage had broken us, and trust couldn't be restored. I started dating Bridget less than a year after the divorce, just after Maddie's 4th birthday. Bridget worked with Shanna, and that's how we met. She had hinted at dating for months and finally asked me out. Shanna gave her hesitant approval, though I could tell it hurt her. Despite that, she supported me, even when she had tears in her eyes after hearing about my dates. Bridget and I grew closer, and 3 months in, she changed everything for me in bed. 6 months later, she admitted she'd ended an intense but unhealthy relationship around the time of my divorce. She saw me as a kind and stable person compared to her past. Bridget, petite and fit, eventually moved in with me. We had fun, shared laughter, and enjoyed staying in or going out. A year in, she hinted at marriage, and I soon proposed. We married 8 months later, though not without conflicts over a prenup. After tense discussions and pressure from my board, she signed it. While Bridget and I prepared for marriage, Shauna met Rick, who I couldn't dislike. He was older, supportive, and balanced her in ways I couldn't. Their relationship started slowly, unlike the passionate start Bridget and I had. Shanna and I talked through our feelings to avoid letting jealousy ruin our friendship. As Bridget and I and Rick and Shanna became couples, everyone respected our bond. Early on, Rick once reacted to seeing Shanna hug me after I dropped Maddie off, but Shanna told him to accept our friendship or leave. By then, Bridget and I were married, and Shanna and Rick were engaged. 6 months later, I stood as Rick's best man at his wedding to Shauna. It felt surreal how our relationship had evolved. Shanna and I had always been close, and with Maddie in the picture, that connection was permanent. Once Rick accepted that, we became close friends. He saw that while I loved Shauna, it wasn't in the same way he did. Meanwhile, Bridget and Shanna shared an amicable, though not deep, friendship. Back in the present, Maddie, my restless daughter, stole a chocolate chip from a cupcake. I kissed her cheek. "No, honey," I said, trying to explain without revealing too much. "Mom and I aren't fighting. She's just talking to me about something difficult." "It's about Bridget, isn't it?" Maddie said, looking defiant. I was surprised. "Maddie, you need to respect Bridget. You like Rick, and he's not your dad." She picked at the muffin and muttered, "Yeah, but Rick respects you and Mom. Bridget doesn't like Mom or me, and she doesn't respect you." Her words hit me hard. Bridget and I had been together for 4 years, married for 3, and it dawned on me that I had ignored signs of her behavior. I'd been passive, trying to make it work. After a silent moment, Shanna returned with Greg and told Maddie to take him outside. Maddie protested but obeyed when Shanna used her mom voice. We watched Maddie and Greg play in the sandbox. "Maddie sees too much for her age," Shauna said. "She must get it from you," I replied sadly. Looking at Shanna, the woman I had loved for so long, I felt despair. Without seeing the envelope's contents yet, I already knew. Shanna sat beside me and embraced me as tears fell. I knew deep down that Bridget hadn't loved me the same for a while. I reached for the envelope, opened it, and found 2 documents and a USB drive. Shanna placed her hand on mine. "Tim, this is only going to hurt." Inside were detailed reports and recordings that confirmed everything. I returned the contents to the envelope, feeling numb. "Why?" I asked, broken. Shanna didn't respond, sensing my pain. "Tim," she began, but stopped. "Am I so pathetic that the women I love cheat on me?" I regretted the words as soon as they left my mouth. Shanna quickly kissed my cheek and hugged me, crying. "I'm sorry, Tim. I shouldn't have..." It's not you, Shauna, I interrupted. I'm sorry for comparing it to us. Will you forgive me? She pulled away, smiled weakly, and kissed my forehead. Of course, a voice interrupted us. Well, what do we have here? Rick approached us, trying to keep a serious look, but failing as a smile played on his face. His expression shifted to concern when he saw the envelope in my hands. Oh, he said, sitting beside me and placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. Sorry, man. I started this after talking with Shauna and Maddie a couple of months ago. I had a private investigator look into it and got the report yesterday, Rick explained, concern clear on his face. Have you seen it? I asked. Rick shook his head. No, just the basics, but it seems you both have. We nodded and Rick leaned back. So what's next? He asked. Divorce, I shrugged. We watched Maddie and Greg playing in the sandbox, Maddie glancing at us occasionally. Despite the heavy moment, we smiled. Babe, Shauna said to Rick, should we introduce Tim? Rick finished. Shanna nodded, and I agreed, handing the envelope to Rick. You'll need this, I said. Rick returned it. I have a copy on my desk. This is yours. I quickly emailed a copy of the prenup Bridget and I signed to my new family lawyer, feeling ironic amusement as I sent it to my ex-wife's husband. Shauna smiled. What's that for? For my lawyer. Time to move forward with the divorce, I said as Rick gave a knowing smile. After a pause, Shanna hugged me, and Rick patted my back. Good to see you haven't lost your humor, Rick said. We talked about my next steps. Bridget's spending a week with her mother on the Gold Coast, I said, realizing she probably wasn't there. The looks Rick and Shanna exchanged confirmed my suspicion. Okay, I said, feeling the sting of betrayal deepen. We spoke for a bit before Maddie returned with Greg as the sun set. After many hugs, I left in my Arctic White 2016 Mach 1 Mustang, a reward for reaching $5 million in revenue. A surprise to the board when I spent only part of my budget. At home, the security gate closed behind me. The house, rented from a subsidiary of Other Gaming, was modern, spacious, and what Bridget wanted. I only needed an office and a bed. The house had seen its share of parties and memories. The thought of Bridget and Brad here made me uneasy. Dropping the envelope on the counter, I poured a double shot of Bundaberg rum, mixed it with Coke, and prepared to read the report and review the USB contents. The report confirmed Bridget and Brad's history. They had dated before Bridget and I met, but had a rough breakup. The investigators' findings proved my suspicions true. The report confirmed Bridget and Brad had dated before she and I got together, breaking up months prior. Reading through it, I saw that while their breakup was rough, they hadn't been in contact for 6 months before my wedding. But less than 3 months after our honeymoon, Bridget restarted her relationship with Brad. The report included transcripts of conversations and a USB with video and audio evidence showing their full-blown affair. One conversation detailed them at Brad's apartment a month ago. I played the video and watched as Brad, emotional, said, "Why don't you leave that loser and come back to me? You're in my bed as much as his." Bridget laughed. "Tim has 2 things you don't, brains and money," she replied. Brad scoffed, and Bridget explained, "Tim's successful, and I can use that while I'm his wife. That's why I took my chance when Shanna left him. If Tim ever catches us, I'll end up with nothing." Brad complained. "But you're still with him." "I have to be," Bridget said. "If I don't act like a good wife, this," she gestured around, "ends." Brad groaned, but accepted it. Bridget then added with a grin, "Tim and I might start trying for kids soon. What if I stop taking the pill and pass it off as his? When the baby's 18, you can tell him it's yours before an accident happens." Brad cheered, and I rushed to the bathroom, nauseous. I barely slept, haunted by the report and video. By 8:30 a.m., my phone woke me. Bridget's cheerful voice greeted me. "Hello, big guy! Are you home while I'm gone?" I paused, unsure how to respond. "Tim, are you okay?" she asked, concern in her voice. Feigned, I decided. "Yeah, just a late night, dealing with complicated work," I replied. "Oh, I'm sorry, baby. I'll be back Monday night. Maybe we can start working on that baby," she said, confirming her plans with Brad. "Sure," I said flatly. "Tim?" She sounded uncertain. "I'm fine, Bridget, just tired," I sighed. "Okay, I'll bring something nice back for you," she said. "Sounds good," I replied, feigning affection. "Love you," she said. "Goodbye," I responded and ended the call. The thought of Bridget trying to get pregnant with Brad's child while passing it off as mine haunted me. A few weeks ago, she'd made a show of throwing out her birth control, claiming it was time to start a family. I was furious. I spent the day taking action, cutting off Bridget's access to my bank accounts, canceling joint credit cards, and having my accountant and lawyer remove her from my insurance and will. I also drafted letters introducing Rick to my team to set things in motion. The net was closing around Bridget, and I felt a grim satisfaction. Around lunchtime, Rick and Shanna brought food, and Maddie took Greg to play in her room while Shanna prepared lunch, and Rick and I talked. "Thanks for the letter," Rick said, studying me. "You look exhausted." I nodded. "Barely slept. The dreams—" Rick nodded in understanding. "Do you think Monday's too soon to act?" he asked. "No, I want this done fast," I replied. Rick agreed, offering to work that day for an extra fee. "Not a problem," I said. We talked about the investigator's report, and I revealed that Bridget was planning to pass Brad's child as mine. Rick's eyes widened, and Shanna looked shocked. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes, and I saw her say it on video," I said, slumping. "Don't worry, Tim," Rick assured me. "I'll prepare a restraining order for Monday." "I'll help pack her things," Shanna added. I spent hours packing Bridget's belongings, keeping only what she owned before our marriage. Shanna and I boxed up her clothes and personal items, while I planned to donate the rest. Rick called a few times to discuss details, and by the time he returned with takeout that evening, his serious demeanor showed he'd reviewed the evidence. He hugged me, showing genuine friendship. I handed him a note. "What's this?" he asked. "The new front gate code. I reset everything and removed Bridget's access," I explained. "Perfect," Rick said. We talked briefly before he found his son, and Shanna and I prepared dinner. They stayed the night and most of Sunday, with Rick discussing divorce steps. Unlike my amicable split with Shanna, this time I was determined not to let Bridget gain anything. On Sunday morning, Shanna admitted, "I never thought she loved you, Tim. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." "I get it," I said, understanding her hesitation due to our history. Shanna added, "You allowed her freedom, but she took advantage. I'm glad this ended before the pregnancy." We talked until Maddie came in, leading a smiling Greg by the hands. We spent 15 minutes entertaining the kids before Rick put on a movie for them. "Maddie really picked up on everything," Shanna said. "She never liked Bridget. No one messes with her dad. Except her mom," I joked, earning a playful punch. Shanna's expression turned serious. "Tim, I'm sorry things didn't work out, but that doesn't mean I love you any less," she said, her eyes sad. "I know," I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "You're my best friend." "We made Maddie together, went through so much, and you showed me true character," Shanna continued. "You never treated me poorly, even when I deserved it." Rick, overhearing, added, "Tim, you're one of the few people I trust." When Shanna told me to stop being jealous, I realized you were just a decent man wanting to raise his daughter and stay friends. Rick looked at me. "Tim, you're not submissive. I've seen you stand your ground with Shanna and others." Shanna nodded. "You play by your own rules. Bridget underestimated that." Rick turned serious. "You did everything right as a husband, and Bridget's betrayal is her loss, not yours." We calmed down, and Shanna offered to let Maddie stay with me for support, but I declined, not wanting her caught in any fallout. On Monday, I worked at the office on a major project, anxious about what was to come. By late afternoon, my phone rang. "Tim, my code isn't working at the gate," Bridget said sweetly. "I know," I replied firmly. "What do you mean?" she asked, concerned. "I know everything, Bridget, about Brad, your plans, your time off, the apartment I paid for, and that you don't love me." She stayed silent. "Your access is revoked. You don't live here anymore." "But Tim, I love you," she insisted, fear creeping into her voice. "Look behind you," I said, seeing cars pull up through the window. A man's voice came through her phone. "Mrs. Bridget Other?" "Yes," she replied, voice shaking. "You've been served," he said, detailing the divorce petition, the prenup, the eviction notice, and the restraining order effective tonight. Bridget stood frozen as reality hit. The man who served Bridget left in his car. He was worth every penny I paid Rick. Bridget's next conversation was with her mother, Marion, who had just arrived. "Mom, Tim," she started, but Marion slapped her, the sound audible over the phone. "Ho," Marion said. "I know what you did to Tim. I've never been so disappointed." "Mom, whatever Tim told you isn't true," Bridget protested, touching her cheek. Marion looked ready to slap her again, but walked back to her car. "Stop, Bridget. Tim showed me a picture, and I know the truth. He asked us to take you in. I can't believe you got involved with Brad again. He's a loser compared to Tim," Marion said. Still listening on the line, I heard Marion add, "Tim moved your things to our place. If I were him, I'd have burned them. Get in." Ignoring Bridget's protests, she got in the car. Bridget realized our call was still connected. "Tim," she said hesitantly. "Bridget?" I replied coldly. "There's no fixing this, is there?" she asked, a mix of hope and despair in her voice. I laughed bitterly. "Not a chance. Follow the divorce terms and you'll be fine. Cross me and I'll leave you with nothing." "I did love you," I added quietly, "but you ruined it for money." "Oh, and Bridget," I said, pausing. She held her breath. "Take a pregnancy test. If you're pregnant, we both know it's not mine. Try to claim otherwise, and I'll make sure you regret it." I hung up to the sound of her sobbing. I felt empty, but better. The next month was tough. I buried myself in work and spent time with Maddie. Nights were restless, filled with bad dreams. Bridget's lawyer planned to challenge the prenup, aiming for a 50-50th split. Rick put forward a $30,000 settlement, but no response came. That weekend, I took Maddie to the beach. We ate ice cream outside an old fish and chip shop after a swim. The cool breeze hinted at winter, but the sun kept the water pleasant. Suddenly, I was pulled backward off my chair. Maddie screamed as I fall on the ground, gasping for breath. Brad Houghton loomed over me, saliva on my face. "You couldn't satisfy Bridget," he taunted. He glanced at Maddie with a twisted smile. "I bet she isn't even yours." Brad stepped toward me. "You got me kicked out. I was fine with Bridget playing house with you. All you had to do was stay in line." I tried to dodge, but caught his punch in my shoulder, spinning into a garden bed. Before he could punch me again, Maddie jumped in front, shouting, "Leave my dad alone! He hasn't done anything! Help! Police!" I was later told I was unconscious for about 30 seconds. When I came to, a small crowd surrounded me, and my arm was wrapped protectively around Maddie. Brad was gone. Someone said they had called emergency services, and help was on the way. Ignoring the pain in my back and arm, I sat up and asked for my phone and keys. An older man looked at me sympathetically. "Sorry, son, he took your phone and keys." I nodded, feeling the throbbing pain. With a towel pressed to my head, I asked for Maddie's bag. A younger man brought it over, and I used Maddie's phone to call Shauna. She answered on the third ring, cheerful. "Shauna," I croaked. "Tim, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. "We're hurt. Maddie's okay but shaken. The police and ambulance are on their way. Call Nadine to track my phone. It's urgent." "What happened?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Brad attacked us," I said. Maddie, fighting tears, stayed silent beside me. "He has my phone and keys. He might have my car too." "I'm on it. Take care of Maddie," Shauna said. "I will," I replied, and hung up. Paramedics arrived and checked Maddie and me. They suspected Maddie's arm was broken and said she'd be worse off if I hadn't intervened. They moved us into the ambulance and took an initial statement from me as we headed to the hospital. In the ER, Maddie and I were treated in the same bay. She clung to me until Shauna rushed in, found Maddie, and hugged her. She then turned to me, kissing my cheek gratefully. X-rays confirmed Maddie's small arm fracture, and she was treated with a child-safe anesthetic and bandaged. I had a concussion, 5 broken ribs, and a fractured arm. The doctor warned me about severe bruising on my back. Painkillers were administered and clips were applied to a wound on my head. I lay in bed, looking at Maddie's brave smile through her tears. Shauna stood by, eyes wet, as she said, "Thank you." "I'd do anything for you two," I whispered, leaning back painfully. Shauna kissed my forehead. "I love you too, Tim," she said, making me smile despite the pain. Suddenly I coughed, noticing a faint metallic taste, and Shauna's concerned voice called out as I felt a sharp pain in my side before everything faded to black. I woke 3 days later in a private hospital room with Rick beside me. "Hey buddy, how are you feeling?" he asked. "Terrible," I croaked. "Is Maddie okay?" Rick smiled. "She's fine, with a cast and all. She'll be back at school next week, telling everyone about her hero dad." I tried to laugh, but winced. Rick handed me a device. "Press for morphine if the pain's too much." "What else?" I asked. Rick's face turned serious. "A rib punctured your lung. They did minor surgery, but you'll recover." A nurse checked my vitals and adjusted my meds before leaving. "Any news on Brad?" I asked. Rick pulled out his phone, showing a news clip from the night Maddie and I were brought in. The anchor announced a manhunt for Bradley Houghton, who attacked me, stole my car and phone, and was last seen heading toward Newcastle. He was considered dangerous, and the public was urged to call Crime Stoppers if they saw him. "They caught him yesterday in Wollongong," Rick said. "He ran a red light in your car and got arrested. The car's totaled, but at least he's caught." I nodded. "Glad he's caught. Maddie's safe. That's what matters." Maddie soon ran into the room with Shauna and Greg behind her. "Daddy!" she cried, climbing onto my bed with concern. "I'm feeling better, Princess," I said, smiling. "You were so brave." "My doctor said I was brave, but I told him you were the brave one," she said, glancing at our matching casts. "Thanks, sweetheart," I said, holding back tears. "We'll have another beach day when we're better." Rick took the kids for a walk, leaving Shauna with me. "You scared us," she said, holding my hand. "I'm sorry," I replied. "Just glad you're okay." Nadine and colleagues later visited with cards and chocolates, which Greg had already sampled. After over a week in the hospital, police took my full statement and soon arrested Bridget as an accessory. During questioning, Brad revealed she encouraged him to damage me out of revenge. Brad was sentenced to 15 years for attack, theft, and property damage, with a chance of parole after 12. Bridget received a 5-year sentence with probation, facing the full term if she broke any rules. The judge granted me an immediate divorce, saying no one deserved to be tied to someone like her. Surprisingly, I offered Bridget $10,000 to start fresh, with the condition she left Byron Bay. During recovery, Nadine worked with me at home, often joined by Shauna. Nadine, my executive assistant, was married and in her 60s, so romance wasn't in the picture. One day, seeing Maddie with her signed cast, I was inspired to run a charity campaign in our games. For every $10 pack bought, we'd donate $1 to charity. The finance team initially resisted, as it cut 30% of profit, but revenue soared, and we raised nearly $500,000 for charities in Australia, Poland, and South America. This campaign became an annual event. By summer, Maddie and I had healed, and we returned to the beach, joined by Shauna, Greg, and sometimes Rick. It was a great summer, but I felt lonely. Shauna suggested I start dating again. "I just don't feel it," I admitted. My few dates had gone poorly. Either no chemistry or they were after money, like Bridget. "I wish I could find someone like you, Shauna," I said. She smiled knowingly, but stayed quiet. At 31, I had time to figure it out. A year later, Bridget made occasional contact, mostly seeking money or forgiveness. Each time I refused and ended the conversation. Life was about to change again. I had turned 32, and Shanna, Nadine, and my team planned a birthday party at my house. I stayed in that house post-divorce, having invested so much into it and appreciating its beauty. Over 100 guests attended my birthday party, including coworkers, local business people, and even Carly Evans. Family members, like my parents and Shauna's, were there, along with some of Rick's relatives. The atmosphere was lively with food, drinks, and music, and I was enjoying the buzz as people kept handing me fresh drinks. I had just seen Maddie playing when I bumped into a woman and muttered an apology. "That's all you have to say? Just sorry?" she snapped. I turned to face her, a striking tall woman with deep blue eyes, long red hair, and a floral jumpsuit. She held an unlit cigarette. "Where can I smoke?" she asked, annoyed. "There's no smoking here, and you'll need to go outside," I replied. "Is the owner really that strict?" she asked mockingly. "Yes," I said. She pointed to a quiet spot by the pool, but I shook my head. "Not here, especially with kids around." At the mention of kids, she tucked the cigarette away. Just then, Maddie walked up with her friends and Greg. "Daddy said no smoking, so don't smoke," Maddie declared. "Is this man your dad?" the woman asked. "Uh-huh," Maddie said, hands on her hips, mirrored by the other kids. The woman stepped back, surprised. Before Maddie could escalate, Greg, thinking I was about to act, pushed the woman. Standing at the pool's edge in heels, she lost her balance. I reached out to catch her, but we both fell in with a splash. I surfaced laughing while she sputtered and glared at me. "How dare you laugh?" she scolded. "It's funny," I said, holding back a grin. "We fell in. Classic slapstick." "Karen," I joked, and she looked confused. "Who's Karen?" she demanded, as the cigarette floated between us. "Sorry, I don't know your name. But with your attitude and wanting a smoking spot, I figured Karen fit," I said with a grin. Her face turned red with anger. "My name is Lily," she corrected, with a hint of pain in her eyes. "Tim," Rick called, walking over with Shauna and towels. "Knew you'd get into trouble," he muttered, glancing between Lily and me. I helped Lily out of the pool, thinking this night had taken an unexpected turn. As the pool incident settled, guests resumed their conversations, laughing as we climbed out. Shayna smirked at me, dripping wet. "You got in sooner than expected. Happy birthday, water boy," she teased. Grabbing a towel, I did my best Blue Steel impression and joked, Merman, strutting away like a model. Shayna burst into laughter. Rick handed a towel to Lily, who muttered, "Who is Tim anyway?" The most arrogant man and no smoking allowed. That's our host, the birthday boy, Rick said, giving her bag back. Lily's eyes widened as she saw me reenacting the fall with guests and caught my glance. Not again, Lily groaned as Rick chuckled, and I went inside to change. The evening continued smoothly, with Greg getting a gentle reprimand for pushing and Maddie receiving a talk about understanding situations before reacting. Later I saw Maddie apologize to Lily, who was drying off with clothes Shauna had lent her. As the evening wound down, I noticed Lily with Rick and Shauna. Most guests had left or were watching a movie with the kids. I poured a drink and joined them. So, Karen, I teased, do you work parties like this or just special ones? She smiled. Only for arrogant men whose kids push me into pools. I laughed. They're Rick and Shauna's kids. Lily looked confused. But Maddie's yours, right? And Greg is Shauna and Rick's? Yes, Tim and I were married, and Maddie is our daughter, Shanna confirmed. Lily's expression shifted to sadness. How do you handle it? She asked, a hint of pain in her voice. Rick spoke up. Lily, Tim and Shanna are best friends. I learned not to be jealous. They share Maddie, and I trust them completely. He smiled at Shanna, who giggled. It's unusual, Shanna added. But we were friends before marriage, and Tim's always supported Maddie and me. We realized we weren't meant to be married, but I trust him as I would a brother. Lily's expression softened. That case Rick was involved with a couple of years ago. Was that you? Yes, I said, taking a sip. Maddie's protective because of what happened. She saw me get hurt, and Greg was just copying her bravery when he pushed you. I'm sorry for that. Lily nodded, understanding. If you need to smoke, feel free, I offered. But I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, she sighed. It's a bad habit I picked up again recently. A tear formed as she glanced at Rick and then walked to a quiet corner. Rick shook his head slightly. That's a story for another time, he said. When Lily returned, her eyes were red from crying. We shifted the conversation to Star Wars. Rick and Shanna weren't big fans, but had watched some episodes with me, like The Mandalorian. I joked about future plot lines when Lily surprised us by joining in, smiling for the first time and showing her hidden warmth. Are you a Star Wars fan? I asked. More of a general sci-fi fan, she admitted. As midnight approached, most guests left, leaving just us and the kids asleep in lounge chairs. I settled Shauna, Rick, and Greg in their room, while Maddie went to hers, and Lily stayed in the guest room. As I fell asleep, I recalled Lily's striking figure in the pool, but noted her smoking habit. The next few days were spent at my house with Shana, Rick, and Lily. We went to the beach, swam, and had fun. Despite her smoking habit, Lily turned out to be kind. One evening, while watching Shanna, Rick, and the kids in the pool, I asked Lily, "What's your story?" She glared. "None of your business," she snapped. I raised my hands, apologizing. "I was curious since you never actually smoke." Lily hesitated but finally spoke. "I lost the baby," she said quietly. I nodded, listening as she recounted how she'd gotten pregnant 6 months into her relationship. Her boyfriend Aaron was initially reluctant, and as she began showing, he came home drunk more often. One night, an argument escalated, and he pushed her when he heard approaching sirens, thinking she had called the police. She lost the baby 2 days later and needed surgery. "I'm so sorry, Lily," I said, my voice heavy with sympathy. "Thank you," she whispered, wiping her eyes and handing me a tissue, which I accepted as my own eyes grew wet. She explained that she fell into depression and was put on medications. "Sometimes I can be a bit cocky," she added with a small laugh. I joined in, lightening the moment. "You started smoking to cope?" I asked lightly. Lily nodded. "My friends and I smoked in college. It's a bad habit, but it helps." "Can I give you a hug?" I asked gently. She looked at me, surprised. "The police and surgeon couldn't offer that," I said softly. Lily stood and walked over, arms open like Maddie when she wanted comfort. I hugged her, and she stiffened at first, but then clung to me, breaking down in sobs. I glanced at Shanna and Rick by the pool. Rick frowned, but Shanna led him and the kids away to give us space. I guided Lily to a quieter spot, and she rested her head on my chest, still crying, as I held her like I would Maddie when she was upset. After about 10 minutes, Shanna and Rick brought the kids inside, passing us quietly. Shanna returned with tissues and water, setting them down before leaving. Lily looked at the setup, her eyes puffy and makeup smudged. I wiped her tears, poured water, and handed it to her. "Are you okay?" I asked. Lily shook her head, then nodded. "Yeah, thanks. I needed that." I smiled. "It's okay. When I divorced Bridget, Shauna comforted me too. I probably looked worse than you." Lily laughed, glancing at the tissue. Shauna is really special to you, huh? She asked. She's my best friend. We've been through everything together, even during our divorce, I said. What about Bridget? Lily asked. I sighed. Marrying Bridget was a mistake. She cheated for a long time, and while I thought I loved her, she just saw me as a meal ticket. I'm sorry, Tim, Lily said. Despite my rough start with you, you're a good person. Bridget was foolish. Any girl would be lucky to have you. Any girl? I raised an eyebrow. Lily nodded. Yeah, if only I could be that girl. Before she could finish, I leaned in and kissed her. Her eyes widened, then closed, and she kissed me back, this time not with comfort, but genuine attraction. When we broke apart, she smiled. That was unexpected, she said, then quickly added, but not unwelcome. Exactly, I said. We talked as the sun set, sharing stories of past pain. Lily mentioned her ex was now in jail for attack and DUI. The night he attacked her, he was driving well over the legal limit. As night fell, Shanna and the kids returned with Rick carrying a hot pizza. The mood was tense for a moment until Lily told Shanna and Rick we had discussed old wounds, without details. I knew Shanna would ask me for more later. After dinner, we all went home. Maddie stayed with me while Shanna and Rick took Greg and Lily to their place. The hug with Lily was awkward, but there was an undeniable affection that didn't go unnoticed by Shanna or Rick. As Maddie and I were getting ready for bed, she asked me a serious question. You like her, don't you? Maddie said, brushing her hair. I think I do, but we've only known her for a couple of days. Let's give her time, okay? We don't want another Bridget, I replied. Maddie snorted. I don't think Lily's like that, she said, catching herself. Sorry, I meant that undeserving woman. I laughed. It's okay, Bridget was a bit of a witch. We shared a smile. But just watch your words, and Lily... Well, we'll see. What do you think? Maddie chewed her lip. She's not like Bridget. Mom and I noticed how she looks at you. She's been through stuff, too. Yeah, she has, I agreed, then changed the subject as we settled into the bedtime routine. Later, I was in my office when Shanna called. I don't know what you said, but Lily can't stop talking about you, she said, teasing but concerned. I chuckled. Hi to you too, I replied, multitasking by reviewing the development schedule. I'm serious, Tim. She told Rick all the way home that you're great. Apparently her ex was abusive, Shanna continued. She told me, I confirmed quietly. Shauna paused. She's been through a lot, hasn't she? Yeah, a lot, I replied. But she told me in confidence. I can't share more, even with you. After a pause, Shauna said, So, you like her? I hesitated. Yeah, I do. She's smart, funny, loves sci-fi, and doesn't mind that I'm a geek. Shanna laughed. And gorgeous too, right? I hadn't noticed, I replied, trying to stay serious. We both laughed. Shanna shifted back to serious. She likes you more than just a flirtation. She's asked me about you and Maddie, and she's worried about us. I smiled. She doesn't need to be. After talking with her and Maddie, I'm starting to think there's life after Bridget. Shanna agreed. There will be. Do you mind if I speak for you? I know what to say. Sure, go ahead, I said. I'm not sure it's going anywhere, but let's see. 3 days passed without word from Lily or Shanna. Maddie seemed quiet, and during dinner I caught her glancing at me like something was up. I buried myself in work. Then, Wednesday night, I came home to find Maddie, Shanna, and Lily in my living room. Shanna and Lily were drinking wine, and the smell of carbonara wafted from the kitchen. After dinner, I excused myself to my office to plan my evening work. Once Maddie was in bed, I kept a low profile, unsure how things would play out with Lily. Lily, she said as she entered, stopping to look around at my computer setup. Her gaze lingered on the posters and awards lining the walls, reminders of my success with other gaming. I know this game, she said, pointing to one. I spent a lot of money on the bonus packs. She continued to recognize others and showed me a game on her phone that had helped her during a tough time in the hospital. Do you work for the people who make these games? She asked, intrigued. Open puzzle build. And look at the bottom right, I said. When she saw the name Other Gaming, her eyes widened. That's me, I confirmed. I started the company when I was 19, and all of these games are mine. Lily was stunned. You own the company? The games? She asked, disbelief in her voice. I chuckled. Yeah, I guess that makes me more than just another guy. Lily's face went pale. I just came to tell you dinner's ready, she muttered. Dinner was excellent, with Lily preparing a delicious carbonara, garlic bread, and vanilla ice cream. The mood was warm, but Lily was quiet despite the compliments from us all. Afterward, Shauna took Maddie to bed and subtly signaled for me to talk to Lily. I poured us each a glass of dessert wine, then sat with Lily. "You okay, Lily?" I asked. "The dinner was amazing, but you didn't seem to enjoy it." She sighed and slouched on the couch. "Tim, have you ever felt like you can rise above everything, but then you realize it's impossible? The gap is just too wide?" I thought for a moment. I felt that way with Bridget. I loved her, but when I found out the truth, it broke me. Something still feels off, but I know I need to fix it. Lily nodded. "You're my ravine?" she said softly. I was confused. "I don't understand. How can I be your chasm?" She smiled, then blushed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I think we both know there's something between us. That kiss—" She paused, but the smile faded as she grew more serious. "But after spending time with everyone, I realized I can't bridge the gap between us. I can't be the one for you." "Why?" I asked, puzzled. Lily looked at me, her eyes filled with emotion. "I'm just an administrator from nowhere. I make under $60,000 a year. I can't compare to your world. I don't want to be a gold digger. Sometimes I feel like I'm nothing." She teared up, and I reached out, unsure of how to comfort her. Lily poured her heart out, worried I'd see her as a gold digger like Bridget. She'd lost a child and was angry, but for some reason she opened up to me. I knew what I had to do. "Lily, come with me." I took her hand and led her outside. As we walked by the pool, I suddenly picked her up and jumped in, fully clothed. As we surfaced, I started laughing and Lily hissed, just like the week before. "Lily, I don't care about your past. You're not nothing to me. You're beautiful, talented, and you cared enough tonight to cook an amazing dinner. Before you came into my office, I assumed Shauna and Maddie saw you liked me, and they encouraged you, right?" She nodded. "If they thought you were a gold digger, you wouldn't have even been here tonight," I continued. "They don't think that about you. If you'll let me, I'd love to date you and see where it goes." Lily kissed me again. "Okay, Mr. Other, but only if you promise not to throw me into pools again." I laughed. "Sorry, no deal." Before we could say more, Shanna entered, dropping towels on the table. "If you need them, I'll leave towels here. Maddie's in bed and won't bother you." Shanna smiled and sat down. "Watch out for Tim, Lily. He's good. Better than Rick," she teased. I blushed. "Good night. We're going out tomorrow," Shanna said as she left. Lily turned to me, confused. What did she mean by that? "Shauna is protective of those she cares about," I explained. "She never really liked Bridget, but she tolerated her for me. And she just gave you her blessing to pursue me. Trust me, no one else has gotten that." I pulled Lily out of the pool and we wrapped ourselves in towels. We tossed our wet clothes in the laundry and went to my room. As we passed Maddie's room, she called out, "Good night, Daddy. Good night, Lily." The next month was magical. Lily moved in, and we spent lots of time dating and enjoying each other. She applied for a job with the local council and fit in just fine. Meanwhile, I kept a low profile and avoided the glamour of my social circle. When I had to travel to Sydney for a night, Lily panicked. She was worried if I wasn't back by midnight, she'd be alone again. So I arranged to take her with me. She charmed one of the board members and fit right in. A few months later, after a playful pool push before dinner, we exchanged "I love yous." A year after that, I proposed. Maddie and Shauna were thrilled. Our backyard wedding was perfect, with Rick as my best man and Shauna as my maid of honor. After saying "I do," they pushed us into the pool, and it made for the best photos. For our honeymoon, we toured Europe for a month, discovering how well we suited each other. We fought sometimes, but always worked things out. Lily was fiercely protective and a bit jealous, but it never got toxic. The only women she tolerated were Shauna, Maddie, and Nadine. Anyone else faced her fiery side. If I had worried after 2 failed marriages that loyalty would be an issue, 2 events during our first anniversary put those fears to rest. The first happened on a rare night when Shauna and Lily went to a local club with a group of women. Most were married, though a few were single. While the single women accepted dance invitations, neither Shauna nor Lily danced with any men. 2 men approached and wouldn't take no for an answer, even trying to escort Lily out. She handled it herself, elbowing one in the stomach and striking him with her purse when he refused to back off. She shouted, "I'm married and my body belongs to my husband," until security intervened. The case went to court where CCTV footage confirmed her story and the charges were dropped. The judge gave the men probation, emphasizing that no means no. The second incident occurred a month later. We were camping on Fraser Island, enjoying the sun and surf. A week later, Lily ran into Bridget by chance at a cafe. Bridget, who hadn't seen me since our divorce, had somehow found out about Lily. My wife told me about the encounter while we relaxed by the pool. Rick and Shauna were on the other side, and Maddie and Greg were playing nearby. "I just had an appointment with someone named B. Brown," Lily started. "When she sat down, she stared at me for a long moment before speaking." Bridget hadn't changed. She was still confrontational, and her smirk spoke volumes. "Now I see why he likes you," she said. Lily, assuming it would be a polite conversation, replied, "Thank you, Miss Brown. I like to think my husband Tim finds me attractive." Bridget's smile twisted into something malicious. "Oh, I didn't mean Tim," she snapped. "I meant Aaron." Lily gasped, stunned. "Why did you mention Aaron? How do you know him?" Bridget's eyes sparkled. "Aaron and I know a lot about you. After he got out of prison, I tracked him down." Her voice dropped with venom. "I was Mrs. Other before you, and I want him back." The realization hit, and Lily's shock turned to anger. "Bridget," she said evenly. Bridget nodded. "I'm a witch, but Tim is mine. I made mistakes, but I'll fix them. He loved my body, my curves. You're just damaged goods. A broken woman who lost a baby." Lily's fists clenched. Instead of lashing out physically, she composed herself and stood up. But Bridget wasn't done. She yanked Lily's hair, screaming, "You'll leave Tim! I'll take him back and everything will be mine again!" Lily fought back, landing a punch that knocked Bridget down and tripped her to the ground. "Someone call the police," Lily said to the cafe patrons who had already done so. When the police arrived, they took statements and arrested Bridget. Lily, acting in self-defense, was cleared after several witnesses corroborated her story. Later, Lily admitted she regretted telling Bridget about the pregnancy before telling me. I just laughed and reassured her that Bridget's reaction was insignificant compared to her safety and our unborn child. Bridget was later served a restraining order against all of us, and we never saw her again. Years later, we learned she had married a criminal and faced prison herself. The real surprise came when we found out Lily wasn't carrying twins, but triplets. It was 3 a.m. on a Wednesday when Lily went into labor. Connor, Adam, and their sister Jessie were born via C-section. The doctors were cautious to avoid complications. I was with Lily the entire time, holding her hand through the procedure. She was incredibly brave, and my love for her deepened. I took a 3-month leave from other gaming with the help of a nanny, Maddie's big sister instincts, and Shauna and Rick's support. Changing diapers for 3 babies brought chaos. The house often smelled, but life went on, and we found our rhythm. We had our disagreements, especially when tired. Once I left to cool off at Rick and Shauna's, but we worked things out. Now, the triplets are 3, and Saturday afternoons by the pool have become our tradition. 15 minutes ago, I threw Lily into the pool after she joked that I should act more like Riker from Star Trek. She grabbed me and pulled me in with her. The kids joined us, and soon everyone was splashing around. Later, Lily and I climbed out, drying off while Shauna and Rick joined us. Shauna was still my best friend, and had been a pillar throughout everything. Years later, we all sat down, sharing stories and memories. One afternoon, as we played cards, Shauna leaned over with a sly smile. "She's cheating, you know," she whispered. For a split second, my heart raced. The last time she'd said that, my life nearly fell apart. But this time, I smiled. "I know," I whispered back, catching Lily's playful smirk as she eyed the mirror showing my cards. "He knows what's good for him, Shauna," Lily called out, laying down her cards. "If I win now, he wins later," she added, with a teasing look at me. And yes, I did win later twice.